OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 on this Thursday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It is Eoin and Sheahan with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. We've got plenty of build-up to the weekend Six Nations. We've got Champions League for you. And we got a little bit of history as well, because it is 100 years this month since the Irish soccer split. Of course, 100 years this year since Irish partition in general. So we're going to be stuck into a bit of history after 9 o'clock this morning. You can get in touch with Off The Ball on Twitter. At Off The Ball is how you get us. You can tweet us at the Off The Ball AM account as well, or you can comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us this morning as well. Shane Hannon, happy March 18th to you.
Happy March 18th, Eoin. How are you keeping?
Good. What were the festivities like in Monaghan yesterday?
It was a strange one. The weather, I think, brought out the I guess the feel-good vibes in people. I've been fairly good this year so far in terms of, I think we all had that first lockdown fever where we kind of went mad on the cans and the lack of fitness activities. But this lockdown since December, January, my body's been a temple, Eoin. I haven't, I've had the odd takeaway. I haven't been drinking. I've been doing lots of running and weights and that sort of thing. But yesterday, I have to admit and hold my hands up, the cans came out yesterday because it was just the weather for it. It was great. It was great to get that weather on a St. Patrick's Day. So it definitely helped ease the burden of lockdown, if only for one day, I think.
Talk us through the Shane Hannon fitness regime.
The Shane Hannon fitness regime is fairly boring, to say the very least. It's been a lot of running in Rossmore Park and Monaghan, a lot of 5K time trials, a little bit of boxing thrown in the garage, and a few weights. I treat myself to a takeaway once a week, Eoin. It has to be said I think that's important these days. But I could count on, I think I only drank maybe once or twice this year up until yesterday. So been fairly good in that sense. But with weather like that, I think we all deserve to just let loose a little bit, don't you think?
Yo, without question. Tell me, who are you sparring? Who's helping you with the boxing training?
See, my sister's boyfriend, who is in our bubble, is big into the jiu-jitsu and the MMA and that sort of thing. So he's been schooling me, to say the least, in the garage, which is it's not been easy, but it takes out the frustrations. It vents for yourself. Hitting that pad is fairly good. I wouldn't consider myself a boxer or a pugilist in any sense of the word, but it's definitely a good way to keep fit, I think. And Jesus, it beats sitting around and dwelling on lockdown, I think.
For sure. And one last thing on this, Shane, you can go ahead now and tell us your new 5K time, because not everybody who's listening to us this morning will follow you on Twitter or follow you on social media. I follow you on social media, so I'm well aware of what your 5K PBs tend to be. But tell the world, Shane, what you're running at the moment.
Like, for anyone listening, we didn't plan this. I didn't tell Eoin to bring this up and to ask me what my 5K time is. But since you're pulling my arm and asking me to do it, I will. It's 17 minutes and 54 seconds, Eoin, which I'm pretty proud of, because I remember
pretty incredible.
It was pretty fast, to be fair. Like, I remember the time I first broke 20 minutes running around the streets of Harold's Cross at 1 a.m. A couple of years ago on a fairly quiet night for myself, and I hit 1950. And then to get below 19 was good, which was about maybe 6 months ago. I got 1854. And then my sister's boyfriend, the aforementioned sister's boyfriend, who's about the same pace as me in running, actually hit 1754, at which point I thought, okay, well, now I have to get sub 18. And lo and behold, we did a run a couple of weeks ago around Monaghan town and got my record, so 1754. Pretty proud of it, Eoin, to say the least. So thank you for asking.
So those Nike Vaporflies are working?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's nothing else to do. There is literally, people are asking me, how did you get so good at running over? I'm like, what else have I had to do? Literally, like, running has been the only thing keeping me semi-sane, I think. So the next step, I think, Eoin, is sub 17. Who knows when that'll happen? That's a long way off of this particular juncture. But the world record, I think, for a 5K is 12 minutes and something. So that really kind of brought me straight back down to earth when I realised how fast the truly elite athletes can go.
Well, think how the rest of us feel after listening to you, first of all, telling us about your 17-something time, then listening to the 12-minute time. You would beat me if I was cycling against you in a 5K, to put it like that, Jay. That's an incredible time. Fair play to you. That is 2021 off to a good start for you. We should talk about what's in some of the papers this morning, Shane. We're going to have Ugo Monye with us later on to properly preview England against Ireland this weekend. But from looking around and looking at the possible team selections that are in the papers this weekend, it does seem that there are three main questions that are being presented to the Irish coaching staff before they pick their team later. The first question is Jacob Stockdale and regarding Jacob Stockdale and Bundy Aki, whether or not they come in. So James Lowe versus Jacob Stockdale is question number one. Question number two then is Peter O'Mahony versus Ryan Baird. This one seems like a much easier question to actually decide. It looks like Peter O'Mahony is going to be a shoe-in from what we're reading this morning. And then the third question is Bundy Aki versus Chris Farrell. So if I were to ask you if you were leaning one way in either of those, in all of three of those questions, which way are you going? Who are you picking at centre, whether it's going to be inside or outside centre, on the wing, or in the second row / back row? Which way are you leaning?
I mean, the Henshaw-Ringrose partnership has been probably one of the absolute strongest in this Six Nations for Ireland. But Aki Henshaw is not a bad follow-up. Bundy Aki has been in serious form for Connacht. He deserves this place, I think. And like you mentioned, Peter O'Mahony, there's absolutely no question that he has to be included in this team. If a man like Peter O'Mahony comes back from suspension, he goes straight in. You get worried about players in the second row that maybe a 6-day turnaround could be quite difficult for Tadhg Beirne, Chris Farrell, and as you mentioned, Bundy Aki as well, looking to partner Henshaw. These are positions where you want to give guys a little bit of rest. But having said that, this Irish team are used to 6-day turnarounds. It's the last game of the championship. And then a lot of the conversation around James Lowe has been quite negative, a little bit in the same vein as the Billy Burns stuff from earlier in the championship. So it would be good for James Lowe to be left in. And if anyone listened to Will Greenwood on Wednesday Night Rugby last night, I mean, full of praise for James Lowe. I think he said, put me in a team with James Lowe any day of the week. So regardless of I think he's missed 7 of 17 tackles, according to one of the back pages this morning in this year's Six Nations Championship. So the numbers aren't good for James Lowe. But you'd imagine, and some of the papers with their, I guess, projected teams seem to be suggesting that he might still be included. But not a lot of optimism around this Ireland-England game from various quarters. But I guess seeing Peter O'Mahony back is going to be a good thing. And look, a CJ Stander farewell as well. So lots of positives to take into this game. And it's going to be a bit of a warm-up for the Lions as well. And we had, 11 Lions, Irish Lions in 2017. We're not going to have 11 Lions this time, but we'll have maybe 8 or 9. So there's a couple of interesting strands ahead of this weekend to keep our interest intact, I guess, Eoin.
For sure. We'll bring you the sports pages later on in the show, but just a sample of them. The back of the Irish Independent says O'Mahony set for recall with Lowe poised to keep place. So that's the way they're leading. As I say, nobody's projecting to know the team. It's just the possible teams at the moment. The rationale for that, obviously, is to not dent James Lowe's confidence. I think it's fair to say. The rationale for it as well might be maybe a bit of a longer-term memory when it comes to Jacob Stockdale's defence. And maybe the Irish coaching team actually feel on a defensive level James Lowe and Jacob Stockdale aren't actually that far apart. I know that may seem like a strange thing to say after the last few weeks for James Lowe, but maybe he actually does deserve one more chance. Maybe he just deserves to see out this campaign. And as the week has gone on, I think my view on this has kind of shifted a little bit. I kind of am behind the idea of James Lowe starting this weekend. You listened to Will Greenwood last night, and he's right in what he's saying. When you look at all the positives that he brings to the team, he is the person you want on your side. I know that from watching James Lowe in the Munster versus Leinster games all the time. He is an awful player to be playing against. He is an awful player to be supporting a team that is going up against James Lowe. I accept that he is the king of the Pro 14, and this is a way higher level than that. But I do see the logic in giving him one more chance. When it comes to Aki versus Farrell, then, Rory O'Connor is making the point in the Independent this morning that if you start Bundy Aki, you have to shift Robbie Henshaw to outside centre. And given he's in the form of his life at the moment, is that something you want to do? Maybe you do, because it seems that the Henshaw and Aki relationship maybe is a little bit more, they've got more minutes on the clock. You go back to Connacht, for example, then Robbie Henshaw and Chris Farrell. Now, the thing is with Chris Farrell, he can just slot straight in at 13. He can be a like-for-like replacement for Gary Ringrose, and away you go. So I can see the logic to that as well, and I think that's a really tricky decision, probably the toughest one they'll have this week. And then, as you say, Peter O'Mahony a shoe-in, I think, really to beat essentially Ryan Baird to the team. So, as you say, Tyke Byrne goes into the second row, Peter O'Mahony goes into the back row. And really, the more I think about this, the more I'm like, Peter O'Mahony is going to come back a very, very angry man this weekend with a point to prove, maybe even with a long shot line spot in his crosshairs. He's had these brilliant performances against England in the past when England were heavy favourites against Ireland as well. I can see a huge day from Peter O'Mahony this weekend if he's given the start. So for me, it's O'Mahony, it's Lowe, and I would probably lean towards Chris Farrell in those three decisions. But as I said earlier on, they're picking the team later today, and we'll know before the weekend which way they're going. The other thing, Shane, that we wanted to get stuck into this morning before we get to Phil Egan is the story from Cheltenham yesterday. A great day for tall people. Like the Cheltenham should be our preserve, the sub 6 foot people who dominate you guys when it comes to being the best jockeys in the world. Not so. Keith Donoghue has repped the 6 foot people so well yesterday on board Tiger Roll.
Extraordinary story, Keith Donoghue. Doing it for us 6 foot plussers. It's a difficult life for us 6 foot plussers up here. You get the usual jibes of what's the weather like up there. But now finally we have a representative in horse racing. We have someone who is, whipping out the red carpet, doing it for us. And what an extraordinary ride from Keith Donoghue yesterday. And he's been on Friday Night Racing before, I think, with the lads, within the last year. And his story is just extraordinary. I mean, the effort that he has to go into to lose weight. And look, this is not an unusual story for a jockey that, the weight difficulties are quite tough. But for him, he had that infamous rather, row with Michael O'Leary a number of years back. I think it was 2013, when Michael O'Leary would often put a couple of horses up for races and then pull one late if the conditions weren't right. And for someone like Keith Donoghue, who has to sometimes lose 6 or 7 pounds just for one horse, that takes a remarkable toll. And I think they amended their broken relationship then eventually, and Keith apologised to Michael O'Leary. But Keith Donoghue, when he speaks about only getting time off, if you only get 1 or 2 days off as a jockey, there's no off season for these guys. And for someone like him who has to constantly be losing weight, that must take a remarkable mental toll. And perhaps in no sport is sports psychology, and speaking to someone more pertinent and more important than horse racing, because this guy, he as he says, he does all the homework on horses, but then the weight has often been the killer for him. He's got chances this season because of injury to Jack Kennedy and Davy Russell absent, so he's finally getting his chance to prove his worth. And I think he spoke on Friday Night Racing as well about lockdown and how that's helped him. And not a lot of jockeys would have been happy to see the lockdown coming, because it impacts the sport. Fans can't go. There's a lot less meetings last year, certainly during a couple of the lockdowns. But for him, it gave him the chance to treat this like he was a proper professional athlete, work on his diet. And I guess he could have gone one of two ways. He could have put on a stone, 2 stone, or go the way he's gone and now ride Tiger Roll to victory at Cheltenham. So fair play to Keith Donoghue. What an incredible story.
Yeah, he said on Racing TV afterwards yesterday that he runs 70, 80, 90 kilometres every single week. The question I would have for Keith Donoghue is, what is his 5K time though? Would he be able to go toe-to-toe with Sheahan Hannon? I think not, but an unbelievable day for him yesterday. It is 7:44 on this Thursday morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle today ahead. Phil Egan, a very good morning to you.
How are you doing? How are you getting on?
So we're going to be joined by Christian Falk a little bit later on to get into the German dominance when it comes to the managers in this year's Champions League. How much do you put last night's success, the success of the tie in general, down to Thomas Tuchel?
Oh yeah, I have to give him massive credit, because it's no coincidence that since he's come in, they're unbeaten. 13 games unbeaten now under Tuchel, 9 wins, 4 draws. We always knew Chelsea had a really good squad. I mean, they splashed more than €200 million at it during last summer. So the pressure was on Frank Lampard. Didn't deliver. They conceded lots of goals. But Tuchel's come in. They don't concede goals. They certainly don't concede goals at Stamford Bridge. And obviously, the hardest thing for him is going to be trying to get them to be more clinical and more incisive up front. And we saw glimpses last night where Timo Werner obviously hasn't scored as many goals as people would have thought he would score, but he was the one that set up Ziyech's goal, and Kai Havertz got the ball rolling with that one as well. So the signs are very good for Chelsea when you consider how they're doing now under Tuchel, and definitely we haven't seen the best of Timo Werner or Kai Havertz. And I think for me the best player on the pitch last night was N'Golo Kante. He's had a few injuries, but he was back to his best last night. We know how good he is in terms of his ability to read the game and break things up, but also I think maybe one thing he doesn't get enough credit for is what he does with the ball. He has a great ability just to glide by players, and when that chance, Pulisic had the ball going forward, he obviously chose to pass the ball to Emerson. Brilliant first touch, his first touch since coming off the bench. But who was there on the right hand side of Pulisic? It was N'Golo Kante, and part of me was screaming at Pulisic, pass it to him, he deserves his goal. But obviously Pulisic picked the right option because Emerson hammered one in with his left foot. But yeah, great to see N'Golo Kante back to his best there.
Yeah, like it's that Ziyech goal just that you mentioned there. Like obviously it was a tap in, and people could have been slamming Hakim Ziyech for hitting the ball straight at the goalkeeper if Oblak gets his legs together maybe for that. But I think with Ziyech, has there been too much of a rush to write off players like him this season? That, I don't know, the word flop gets thrown around very easily. I think maybe with Werner there's always an acceptance that he'll come through and come good next season, but the likes of Ziyech and Havertz, I just wonder, have people just got ahead of themselves completely? Now Ziyech being a bit older maybe has got the brunt of it, and like people need to remember he was injured around Christmas time right after picking up a good bit of form under Frank Lampard. Like I thought for a while earlier in the season, Phil, that Ziyech was Chelsea's best player on an attacking level, and then he got injured, and then he just struggled to come back from that. Like I think this guy could be a huge player if Chelsea are going to put together a title challenge next season. Absolutely.
And when they signed him, and you kind of picked your Chelsea team at the start of the season, he was in it, as was Werner, as was Havertz. And I definitely agree. Look, people write players off so easily. I was only talking about the Liverpool central defence the other day and how Ozan Kabak was written off after 2 games. And that is modern day football. If you have a few bad games, people think you're done. And that is not how it works. And especially during a pandemic as well, that you have to factor in some of these players have moved to the Premier League and they're living in these COVID conditions where it's not normal, and obviously there's no crowds at games. But yeah, even I was watching the Liverpool Wolves game the other day, and Willian Jose obviously is playing up front for Wolves, and people would say, oh, he's a flop, it hasn't worked for him. The guy moved from Spain in January. He's been living in a hotel away from his family, and sometimes it takes time to settle in, and that goes for any player that moves to the Premier League. Some hit the ground running, and I suppose because that happens, then the players that don't hit the ground running get compared to the successful stories straight away. So yeah, Ziyech he's a quality player, great technical ability, and when he actually went out of the team earlier in the season, Chelsea started to struggle because they lacked that creativity without him. But he's come back in, and just so many options Tuchel has. Obviously Mason Mount was suspended last night. He's been excellent for them, and you look at the players that they can bring on as well. So yeah, I think Chelsea be quite confident of no matter. I think everyone wants to avoid obviously Man City and Bayern Munich, but Chelsea be looking at the other teams thinking there'd be nobody in there that they'd be too concerned about playing. And do you know what, Tuchel I'm sure wouldn't be afraid to play City or Bayern Munich. It wasn't him that was in charge of the Chelsea team when they lost to City, and they still have to play City in the league. So Tuchel, I suppose the longer this run goes on, the more dangerous they are.
You talked, lads, about Ziyech there, and like someone like Marcos Alonso as well, who by all accounts, for want of a better word, was a reject under Frank Lampard. He played I think 3 games this season under Lampard, and the word was that he was going to be sold this summer. But all of a sudden Tuchel comes in. I think last night was his 9th game under Tuchel alone, so already he's gone from this player that Chelsea were undoubtedly going to sell this summer to someone who is firmly in Thomas Tuchel's plans. So it kind of gives you that vibe of anyone who questions, bringing in a new manager and freshening things up. Chris Wilder at Sheffield United is probably a good example that maybe this is a good thing for some Chelsea players, that getting rid of Lampard, bringing in Tuchel, and it kind of shows you that at any club, if you make a change like this in management, regardless of how controversial that change is, some players are going to thrive off it. Marcos Alonso is just one example.
Yeah, and do you know what? If Alonso doesn't play well, he's got Ben Chilwell and vice versa. And, he just has so many options in all positions. Obviously, Reece James started last night as the right wing back. It's a position that he's tried Hudson-Odoi out as well. If he wants to revert back to a back four, he could play Azpilicueta there. But I really like how Azpilicueta plays in that back three. And, I mean, that was quite evident in the Conte title-winning team as well. In terms of the change, I don't think any of those Frank Lampard fans or the people that thought Frank Lampard got a raw deal, they've gone very quiet, and it didn't actually take too long. And there was probably a lot of people that were thinking, if Tuchel doesn't start well, they'd be quick to hammer him, but he has hit the ground running. Obviously, the 0-0 draw with Wolves in his first game, and even that night I can remember some of the coverage where they had, the most amount of passes, they had all this possession, and the thing that was thrown at them was like, yeah, you have to score goals though. And there was still those people that obviously have worked with Frank Lampard, have been former teammates. They all felt he was harshly treated, but Tuchel's come in and just shown that this Chelsea squad was completely underachieving, and now they're looking up rather than they were looking up under Frank Lampard, but they were looking too far up. And I think Chelsea fans are excited for how this season could finish, but also for next season. And Tuchel has spoken already about how Manchester City have had it too easy this season, and it's up to him to try and close the gap. And there will obviously, at the start of the next season, there will be huge pressure on Chelsea again, because this season hasn't been good enough. Fortunately for Chelsea, though, Tuchel has rescued it.
Phil, before you go, I want to ask you about the Patrick Bamford story in the back pages this morning. I guess we can finally, as an Irish, from an Irish perspective, say goodbye to Patrick Bamford. It looks like he's going to be included in the England squad. They have a pretty hectic schedule coming up, England, so they'll need the likes of Patrick Bamford. But a sad day, I think. I know he had that one under-18 cap, I think, for Ireland,
yeah.
and the granny rule, we held on to that hope, but it's not going to happen.
No, and it was never going to happen. I mean, a couple of years ago, Mick McCarthy extended the olive branch, and he just didn't really say the right things in terms of, this is Bamford, where you thought this guy wants to play for Ireland. And there is some players that would rather hold out for one England call up or a couple than go and play for a different country. And I had certainly accepted it a long time ago, but he will make a good inclusion into the let's have a look at the starting 11 that we could have had. Obviously spearheaded by the likes of Declan Rice and Jack Grealish, and Bamford would be a worthy inclusion, and that gives you a good spine to the team then.
This is a proud moment for all the shoulda, coulda, woulda people out there. It's a sad day indeed. What else is happening in the world of sport, Phil?
Well, actually, obviously you mentioned Patrick Bamford and the England squad. Well, Stephen Kenny's going to name his Ireland squad today as well. So one thing that we're lacking at the moment is goals, and obviously the goalkeeper situation is a problem as well. So it'll be interesting to hear what Stephen Kenny has to say about that. Just in terms of what happened in the Champions League last night, obviously that 2-0 win for Chelsea, the 3-0 aggregate win, puts Chelsea in tomorrow's quarter-final draw. Holders Bayern Munich will be in it as well. They won 2-1 at home to Lazio, so they went through 6-2 on aggregate. Tonight, it's all about the Europa League. Manchester United, Arsenal, Tottenham and Rangers all looking to book a place in the last 8. Arsenal and Tottenham certainly in the driving seat. Both have 2-goal advantages heading into the second leg of their ties. But I think the one we're all going to be watching is United away to AC Milan. Milan scored an injury time last week to get the away goal, so the slight advantage with them. But we know how good United are away from home. That game in Italy kicks off at 8 o'clock. Arsenal have a 3-1 advantage over Olympiacos heading into the second leg at the Emirates. Spurs have a 2-0 lead over Dinamo Zagreb. Second leg is in Croatia. Those games kick off at 5-6. Rangers also in action at 8 o'clock. They are at home to Slavia Prague, 1-1 from last week's first leg. So Rangers have the slight advantage in that one. The Irish will be hoping for more of the same on day 3 of the Cheltenham Festival. 11 Irish winners at the halfway stage. 6 of the 7 races yesterday, there were Irish winners. Trainer Henry de Bromhead won the feature, the champion chase with Put the Kettle On. You mentioned Tiger Roll there, obviously landing in the cross country. That was the 11-year-old's 5th festival win. Today's feature race is the Stayers Hurdle. Goes to post of 3:05. 2019 winner Paisley Park, the favourite for that one. As always, the first of 7 gets underway at 1:20. Another thing that we have to watch out for is the Ireland rugby team announcement to play England at the Aviva Stadium on Saturday. The word is that Peter O'Mahony is going to come straight back into the starting 15 after missing the last 3 games due to suspension. A few other positions up for grabs. Obviously, we know that James Ryan is unavailable, so that's where the O'Mahony selection comes in. Tyke Byrne would move to the second row, and Gary Ringrose in the centre is out. So is it going to be Bundy Aki or Chris Farrell, and probably the other one as well? Will James Lowe hold on to his place, or does Jacob Stockdale come back in? So all will be revealed when Andy Farrell names that team later on today. And finally, from me, Padraig Harrington, a former winner of the Honda Classic, is in the field for that event in Florida later on today, along with Shane Lowry and Graham McDowell. 2015, when Harrington beat Daniel Berger in a playoff. I remember it well. It was a Monday afternoon where you got that bonus of golf on a Monday.
Yeah, God, 2015.
Yeah.
Wow, feels a lot longer ago than that. Phil Egan, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Lads.
Phil Egan there with us every morning on OTB AM. As you can see, plenty coming up this morning. Ugo Monye, we'll get to the piece with him in just a moment. The sports page is coming your way at 8:10, and then at 8:20, we'll be talking to Christian Falk about everything that's happening in Germany and the German managers dominating proceedings in the Champions League. Cormac Moore, then, the historian, will be with us at 9:20. It is 100 years since the Irish soccer split. John Duggan's tips and his nap of the day coming your way at 9 o'clock here, exclusively first on OTB AM. Then our OTB TV picks, including Formula One's Drive to Survive, coming up at 9:10 in the company of Sue Murphy and superfan Shane Hannon. And then at 9:30, it is Wednesday Night Rugby with Will and Andy. That is Will Greenwood and Andy Dunne. If you missed that last night, it's brilliant. It's great analysis ahead of the weekend. So that's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Right, at 7:57 on this Thursday morning, you're watching OTB AM, and we're delighted to say that former Lions and England winger Ugo Monye joins us next as part of the Tackle Your Feelings campaign. Now, this is run by Rugby Players Ireland, and they are urging people to be kind online during the final weekend of Six Nations matches.
OTB AM.
All right, former England, British and Irish Lions and Harlequins rugby player Ugo Monye is with us. Ugo, great to see you. How are you keeping?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having us on. How are you?
Yeah, good. I remember reading you in The Guardian at the end of last year, telling everybody to chill out if they weren't enjoying rugby, because Six Nations 2021 was coming. And boy, were you right. Those first 40 minutes last weekend, unbelievable.
Yeah, it was great to see a change in fortunes, really, in terms of the style of rugby that's been played. I think we've been so fortunate to have been blessed with so many quality games. And this weekend, England, France, Ireland, Scotland, Wales thrashing Italy was just a joy to watch. You know, the world feels quite heavy at the moment, a bit of negativity out there, but yeah, the rugby world is an absolute joy just to be a part of right now.
Is this a coincidence? Is there trends that you're seeing here that make it less so?
I thought last year, the year after World Cup's always quite difficult, because what we've seen, especially in the Six Nations, we've got 3 new head coaches. We've got players transitioning in after the end of a World Cup cycle, and that's perhaps why we saw a little bit of pragmatism. Well, pragmatism or just boring rugby, really. And yeah, a year on, we're seeing those teams start to bed in some of the philosophies, the coaches more adept with their players, brand new cultures, and just players feeling a bit more comfortable. And now they're out there expressing themselves. And I think rugby's forever cyclical. Teams that are often successful, people then try and copycat them. And French rugby seems to be playing some of the best rugby that we've seen in the Northern Hemisphere a long time, whether that's domestic or international. I think people are just copying on, just catching on with it and just wanting to express themselves a little bit. And, you know, if rugby that we're seeing is more attacking, for me as a former winger, I'm absolutely loving it, because if we really want to grow the game, then the games we saw at the weekend will absolutely enable that, because whether you're a rugby flirt and just get to grips with 5 or 6 matches a year, if you're a football fan that likes a little bit of rugby and where rugby's front and centre, then the rugby saw at the weekend converts more rugby fans than anything that we can do.
Especially if the Six Nations is to go behind a paywall, then people will be like, oh, all of a sudden I've got to watch this unmissable action, which is the Six Nations bringing us to the table this year.
Yeah, it's it's really challenging. You've got someone like the RFU, the richest union in the world, that lost the best part of £100 million last year. Our game's not sustainable without finances in it. So if CVC and some of those big broadcasters are willing to put down a lot of cash on the table, it's hard to ignore it. So it's trying to weigh up getting the right investment into the game, which will filter right from the elite game all the way through to the grassroots, because it's not just about rugby for today, it's about the next generation of rugby, but also then weighing that up and trying to get as many eyeballs on the game as possible. So, I'm glad I didn't have to make those decisions, but the people who are in charge of making those decisions, I'm sure they're taking them very seriously and trying to make the best decision for everyone, because it's not just about the game today, it's about the longevity of our game.
On England then, has their style evolved this year? The more attractive outcome that we're seeing, as from a neutral standpoint, watching them in this year's Six Nations, is that because of a different style of play this year?
I think so, and I think the laws are allowing for a far more fluid style of rugby. Teams like Wales tried to play an expansive game of rugby last year, and the laws almost didn't allow for it. Teams that were winning were playing very pragmatically, weren't they? They were kicking a lot of ball. It was about set piece. It was about the battle of the gain line. But it seems that we're allowed to be able to go out and play a bit more fluid rugby. England have always wanted to play more of an attractive brand. We didn't see that, of course, in week one, but then England had 25% possession in the first half against Scotland. Can't do anything with that. You just can't. Wales have expressed themselves a bit more, got bonus point tries in the last 3 rounds. Ireland, I thought, tried a little bit more at the weekend, and in patches looked brilliant with ball in hand. But international rugby is about finding faults and weaknesses within the opposition and then being relentless at that. And the faults in Scotland at the weekend were their set piece. Ireland won 75% of their ball. That's unbelievable. And then the aerial assault came from Jamieson, Gibson Park and Johnny Sexton. Scotland couldn't answer it. So I guess for Irish fans that want them to chuck the ball around a little bit more, it's about finding what works and nailing that. And Ireland did that at the weekend.
Yeah, they certainly did. That possession statistic that you mentioned with regards to the Scotland game is really interesting, because if you analyse that Ireland against England game in the Nations Cup last year, Ireland had the lion's share of possession, the lion's share of territory. I think when it came to a load of other metrics as well that usually seem important, they had beaten England as well. So why have England managed to be so comfortable on the scoreline when all the other metrics go against them, specifically against Ireland?
Because I often think that they win that confrontational battle. That's huge. I think if you're able to win that physicality battle in set piece and on the gain line, it just gives you so much more time and control. So you can do whatever you want. You can kick on your terms. You can play to space on your terms. It just allows you that time. If you lose that physical edge and that physical battle, you can't. You've been hurried and harassed into doing that. If your ruck speed is slow, then it's hard to play a wide, expansive game, especially with these heavy, hard, fast presses. So that's where England have been able to dominate Ireland over the last few encounters, and hence why they've been able to win it. And, it's going to be no different this weekend. It's going to be a huge factor in the game.
In 2019, there was a real sense of confidence, arrogance, almost from Ireland going into that game against England after a pretty good 2018. I remember you saying on your podcast at the time that you were taken aback by how confident people in Dublin were over the course of that week. Do the English see that game as significantly as the Irish rugby supporters do? Because from our perspective, it's like this one game where there was this massive wake-up call, and then 2019 was just an absolute horror show. Do the English see it as the start of an uptick in better fortunes?
Yeah, potentially. I remember watching that game, and the most pleasing thing about the game from an English perspective is that the result never, ever looked like in doubt. I know it was a tight game, but they controlled everything. Set piece, controlled the tempo of the game, where it was played. And when you're in that position, that feeling on the pitch is just amazing. It's a tight game, but there's no panic here. We've kind of got this. But then some of those scars can actually enable you to rethink what you're doing, understand exactly where you let yourselves down or where you put yourself under pressure. But what I saw from Ireland at the weekend was a level of intensity and physicality that has probably been lacking for a little bit. No coincidence that Paul O'Connell's come into camp. A game that was built on physicality and set piece, and Ireland have got a lot better at that. Andy Farrell's the head coach. I know what he's all about. My word, emotion, passion, physicality. He brings that in bucket loads. So you pair those two together, and you'll have a well-prepped team to take on England. You don't have to be a rugby expert to understand where you need to get at England if you want to beat them. If you can't match them physically, you're not going to win. Scotland matched them physically, beat them. Wales did to a certain extent, and discipline let England down. So Ireland need to be able to match England physically, and England have got to do the same against Ireland. That then sets the stall out and sets the blueprint for the rest of the match, because not just in terms of how you feel, the referee's point of view on the game, everything. That's the single most important factor, I think, going into this weekend.
It almost felt no matter what Ireland did, there was no way they could match those two in particular on a physical level. Is that incorrect? Do you think that actually if Ireland get their game plan right, they can have physical dominance over those sorts of players?
Of course. I was mentioning it earlier, but the way in which Ireland was so clinical and ruthless in clearing out rucks at the weekend, so my daughter's crying, apologies.
Not at all.
Working from home. They were so ruthless. I was honestly wincing off my sofa. I was like, wow. If they come with that level of edge and physicality, it's going to be tough. Of course, they've got loads of players that can match England physically, but it's then trying to manipulate defences into positions whereby you can give Billy Vunipola one-on-ones, where you can give Luke Cowan-Dickey or an Ollie Lawrence or whoever it might be, but then Ireland also possess the very same. Wow, she's not happy. I think she's slightly nervous about the game this weekend.
She's calling an Ireland win.
Yeah, she is. But when I look at the Ireland team and some of the enforcers they have, like CJ Staddon, I know he's just announced his retirement at the end of the season. He's a big player for Ireland. He's a big player. Ty Byrne, a big player. Connors, the tackle he put on Duggan van der Merwe at the weekend, like, how did he stop that try? Like, I'm seeing that. Henshaw looks fired up and angry. Sexton was like back at his best. And I'm very happy to talk up this Irish team because it's only right and proper and fair. So it's going to be a proper battle of attrition and physicality, but there is so much more to it than just that. But for me, that's the starting point. Get that right, then everything else will be able to manifest itself.
And it kind of feels important, Ugo, this game. Like, in a weird sense,
yep.
Ireland against England, going for the Grand Slam might have been something that we're used to in previous years. I think the narrative around Eddie Jones and Andy Farrell hangs quite a bit around the outcome of Saturday.
From an England perspective, well, it's sometimes it's not just the loss, it can be the context of how you lose. If England turn over Ireland and beat them up and bully them, then I think there will be questions asked. Like, why can't we match teams physically? If they lose because of a Johnny Sexton X drop goal, like what he did in Paris, then you're like, oh. So, for example, had France won at the weekend, I'd have gone, oof. Hard lines to England, but what a game. That's a very different emotion. Eddie Jones's position within England isn't in jeopardy. I don't know what's been said outside of England, but it's just not. For Andy Farrell, I'm unaware of what's been said or written about him. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of the importance of this game. I think it's huge. I know there's nothing on the line, inverted commas, in terms of a tangible trophy, a Six Nations Championship Grand Slam, but I quite like that those factors aren't there to a certain degree because it's raw. It's just England against Ireland. The only thing that's at stake is pride and winning and losing. That is it. Let's distill rugby into its most natural, organic form. Two teams, two historic rivals going at it. And I love that. I love that.
So what is going to happen then, Ugo? Can you call a winner in this one?
Yep. England by, I don't know, 30, 40, but no, I'm kidding.
I'm with you. We see, we've learned our lessons from 2019. We were uber arrogant, and on this show we were uber arrogant. So I'm with you. 30, 40 points to England.
No. I'm not subscribing to that at all. I think what we've seen, apart from England, France, a one-score game. Scotland, Ireland, a one-score game. In fact, the only outlier of all the games in the Six Nations bar Italy was Wales putting 40 on England. They've all been tight contests. It's going to be fine margins again this weekend. Could come down to discipline. Someone gets their tackle height 6 inches too high, and that's the game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's those fine margins. You give away a penalty for Johnny Sexton, who doesn't miss, to Owen Farrell, who doesn't mix. That could be it. It could be a brilliant bit of genius. It could be an aerial assault. It could be a number of small factors in the game that end up deciding it. I'm expecting a really tight contest. If anyone's out there brave enough to say 10 points, 15 points, like you're just dreaming. It's not going to be that. It's just not going to be.
Well, listen, enjoy a brilliant day of rugby. It should be a cracking game as well between England and Ireland. Ugo, a pleasure as always.
Sorry, what's your prediction?
Oh God, Ireland by 40. No, I'm only joking. I think you will find. I think you'll genuinely find Irish people hard pressed to confidently predict that they will win. I don't know. Like it's weird what a win can do to a team, isn't it? That it doesn't matter if it's Scotland or Italy. The fact that it doesn't matter who the opponents are that Ireland have beaten over the last 2 weeks. 2 wins in the bounce can do an amazing thing for a team, and there could be a strange outcome in store at the weekend where Ireland upset the odds potentially.
Last question. Sorry, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but there's this weird, fashionable thing that's come into rugby. It's the team that are desperate to be the underdog in the week going into any match. Who's the underdog going into this weekend's game?
Well, I mean, we will. It'll be a scrap to the death to try and put our flag down and say we are the underdog in this one. Ireland are 100% the underdog, Ugo. The last 2 years have been miserable from an England from this rivalry standpoint.
Yeah, but then I know we went to the Aviva at 2018 and got a good result there, but the Aviva's not exactly been a happy hunting ground for England. So let's have this battle of who's going to be the underdog for the next 6 days. I'm going to fight for England being the underdog, and you'll fight for Ireland, right?
Just this collective playing down of the chances. Who is worse than the other one? We can win at that game. The Irish can win at that game, I think. Ugo Monye, brilliant. Thanks a million.
Take care. Cheers.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
When Matt Busby signed me, I joined a club with 3 European footballers a year, a World Cup winner. Unbelievable to play with Bestie. Matt Busby management was incredible. He picked players like a jigsaw puzzle. He didn't pressurise you. Go out and enjoy yourself. He never swore. Matt Busby never swore. Can you imagine that from a manager today? He never swore.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Get ready for the CheltenhamFestival with the Boyle Sports app, with a special offer guaranteed on every race, every day of the festival, plus extra places on each way bets over all 4 days. The Boyle Sports app has got you covered. Need to study up? Check out our Racing Post insights or watch our exclusive video previews with Cheltenham Gold Cup winning jockey Robbie Power. The Cheltenham Festival on the faster than ever Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie. 18 plus.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're very welcome back. It is 14 minutes past 8 on this Thursday morning, and we're going to bring you through the sports pages now. OTBsports.com is where we start as ever, and our Cheltenham Festival racing tips for today are up there. James Lowe, meanwhile, put me in a team with him. That is a quote from Will Greenwood. He was on Wednesday Night Rugby last night with Andy Dunne. The full chat is coming your way at 9:30 here this morning. Greenwood also singing the praises of almost every single Irish player is the headline on that one on the homepage. Meanwhile, ex-England defender rubbishes claims of bust up with press officer, and Cavani needs to be more Zlatan than Falcao. Andy Mitten's MUFC report card. It is a massive game tonight for Manchester United. They're playing AC Milan, and it is finally poised for a place in the quarterfinals in that one. Let's take you through the newspapers then. The Irish Times go with the headline, Aki and Stockdale among the likely lads to return for Ireland's finale. Meanwhile, Proudfoot expecting Standard's last stand to inspire Ireland. Matt Proudfoot, the South African coach, obviously involved in Scotland in a previous life. He was up for media yesterday in the English camp and giving some of the inside track on his thoughts on CJ Stander. The Irish Examiner goes with the very simple headline, Paddy Wackery, Irish continued Cheltenham dominance as Tiger Roll bounces back to claim 5th festival win. Tommy Martin has written a column, meanwhile, on sports' role in reforming harmful male attitudes. The Daily Telegraph focuses on the story surrounding Dario Gradi. Gradi's incredible sex abuse claim. Former manager suspended as potential risk to youths, but says he is unaware of ban. Meanwhile, the Irish Daily Star leads with Tiger Roll. Tiger roars back is their headline. 5th festival win for a legend. The Mirror then goes with the headline, Pat's that. That is to do with Patrick Bamford, because the Ireland target is to finally get his lines called today, they say. And it's so easy for Blues is their headline on Chelsea. The London Times then go with the headline, FA lets sexual abusers prey on children. Damning 700-page report criticises 8 clubs. And there's a photograph also on the back of the London Times of Ben Chilwell and Emerson celebrating together as they put Atletico to the sword last night. The Guardian goes with the main headline on Harry Kane. Fitness protection scheme. Great headline. Mourinho calls on Kane but wants England compromise. So he doesn't want Harry Kane playing too many minutes over the start of their World Cup qualification campaign as Spurs look to chase the top 4, as they look to chase potentially the Europa League title and, of course, the Carabao Cup trophy, which they're in the final of. Tiger Roll makes history with 5th festival win as well. Gets a mention on the back of the Guardian. The Irish Sun goes with the headline, which is probably tab of the morning to you. Cava no. Hitmen Ed and Martial KO shock for Ole. And touch tight, took tight is how you could possibly pronounce it as well, is their headline on Chelsea getting over Atletico and their challenge. Kettle Bell with an E at the end, is the headline on the back of the Irish Daily Mail. Henry hails his mare after big festival win. That is put the kettle on doing the business for Henry de Bromhead yesterday. The Irish Independent then goes with a slightly contrasting headline to the Irish Times with regards to the Ireland team. O'Mahony set for recall with Lowe poised to keep place. So James Lowe keeping his place is what they're predicting there. We'll know all later on today. And finally, the Herald, Green Day as Tiger Roll stars. So that is the sports pages for you this morning. Plenty of reaction to our chat at the top of the show, Shane, about the Ireland team. Everybody disagrees with me, as tends to happen when it comes to pretty much every conversation. Declan Murphy says, I'm wrong on O'Mahony and Farrell. Baird is ready for second row. Byrne playing outstanding stuff in back row with Connors. In fairness, he's probably not wrong. Baird looks every bit the test player who looks absolutely good to go, and without him, who knows if Ireland would have got the opportunity to actually kick that penalty at the end against Scotland last week. Alan O'Neill says, would love to see Baird get a start, but maybe O'Mahony will be stepping in to call the line out, which is a good point. But also love to see Henshaw cleaning up Aki's offloads with the new attacking philosophy. Also a good point. Old Man Willie Boy says Baird and Connors should be starting against England, but I can't see anything other than an England win. And he also says we shouldn't be crowing about the win over the Scots. They gifted Ireland the win. Any other Six Nations team would have put 40 on the Scots. Where are you on all of this, Shane? Like, where is your positivity ticker at the moment? Are you all for 3 wins in the bounce now as a result of beating Italy and Scotland? Like, is that a real tangible thing to bring into an England game for you?
First of all, I'm just shocked that people disagree with each other and with you on YouTube comment sections. That's quite extraordinary and a revelation this morning. Like Ugo Monye, tongue-in-cheek, 40-point win for England. It's not going to be that, but a severe lack of enthusiasm going into this game. I guess it's because it doesn't mean anything in terms of a championship or a Grand Slam or even a Triple Crown. And I know Will Greenwood and Andy Dunne both went with an England win last night, I think, on Wednesday Night Rugby. It's hard to disagree with that. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, there are a few interesting strands. Like the Ryan Baird comments on YouTube there are, I guess, fair game, because 21 years of age, playing really well for Leinster, why not throw him in? It's a fair argument. And as you said, that block at the end, which led to Ian Henderson winning the penalty for Johnny Sexton to win it, like he only had one moment. Sometimes a substitute comes on, a la Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and you have one moment in which to either sink or swim. And Ryan Baird very much swam last weekend. So maybe you do throw him into this team for the England game and see how he does. In terms of optimism for the result, no, I think it's hard to see anything but an England win. And as you said to Ugo, like the last couple of years haven't been good for Ireland, and Irish fans haven't been positive. And I think that lack of positivity is going to seep through this weekend, and maybe a 8 to 10 point win for England, I think, unfortunately.
Right. I think it's the 3 points the official spread at the moment. That's what it was when I checked last weekend. But I'd say there's a lot of people who will agree with you on that assessment, Shane. We're going to be speaking to Christian Falk in just a moment about the German dominance manager-wise in the Champions League so far this season. We're going to be chatting about Jurgen Klopp and the interview he's done with Falk's publication, Sport Bild, this week as well. So we'd love to hear your comments on that. Just to finish up on some of the other reaction to our rugby conversation so far this morning. Max05 Gaming disagrees with Old Man Willie Boy. He says Scotland have had a great year so far, narrowly losing to Wales and Ireland and beating England away. They beat Wales away last year as well as France and closely lost to them. And Old Man Willie Boy hit back saying, I'm talking about Scotland's performance on Saturday. They were poor. The stats tell the true picture. The other matches are irrelevant. Narrow losses are still losses, he says. And I guess there's two different sides of the argument here this week. The getting carried away with a Scotland win, like, I mean, is that an acceptable thing to do now? Maybe it is. Maybe the Scotland team really are on the crest of a wave at the moment. Maybe Paul O'Connell was right. Maybe this is the best team that Scotland have produced in 20 years, and Ireland deserve a hell of a lot more credit than they've got for actually just getting the job done against Scotland last week. We'll be joined by Christian in just a moment. It is 8:22 on this Thursday morning. OTB AM is live every weekday morning in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. A little bit later on as well this morning, we're going to be joined by Will Greenwood and Andy Dunne. They were in conversation with Joe last night, and we bring you the best bits from Off the Ball, the evening show, every single morning here at 9:30. So if you didn't get time to listen to the evening show any evening, we bring you the best stuff in half an hour here on OTB AM. We're live every morning from 7:30, and at 8:22 on this Thursday morning, delighted to be joined by Christian Falk, who is, of course, head of football with Bild. Christian, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning to the island.
So for the first time in the history of the Champions League, 4 managers from the same country have reached the quarterfinals. We've got Edin Terzic, we've got Jurgen Klopp, we've got Thomas Tuchel, we've got Hansi Flick. They are all Germans. The Germans are taking over the Champions League, Christian.
So we hope so, but we are looking for a manager for our national team. So our coaches are at the moment successful, but you can't have enough.
We will come to the national team very shortly, Christian, but let's start with Thomas Tuchel. How impressed have you been with the job he's done so far at Chelsea?
I'm really impressed, but I'm not surprised. As you see now, if you look to Paris, they're not doing so well in the league now. When he left, he's really a very, very good coach, you say manager, and that he is doing his job there very well is because he has a new structure. I always thought England is perfect for him. You know, also in Germany or in France, you have a sporting director. This was always the most trouble for him because he has clear ideas. And when somebody is talking with him about, hey, you have to change this in the team and this, he don't like it. In the Premier League, he's not a coach, he's a manager, so as you say. So he can do a lot more things as he can do at the other situations before. So I've been sure that it would be working, and now you see it's working very well.
He needs control, basically. He needs to be the main man. He can't defer to somebody else. And I guess that can work one of two ways. When they're winning, it's this amazing energy, I can imagine, within a club. And that seems to be what's happening at the moment. The questions that a lot of people have is, could he have been the sort of the whisperer almost for the German players at the club who were struggling under Frank Lampard, the likes of Timo Werner and Kai Havertz? But I think it goes a good bit beyond that question. I think any of the young players, even any of the older players at the club, just seem totally reinvigorated under his tutelage so far.
Yes, that's true. I was talking with Tony Rüdiger about this topic, and he said, hey, everybody's talking about the Germans, but see what he does with the other players. Everybody's better now, and he does really well. Mason Mount and Thiago Silva is performing, Rüdiger performing too, sure. But he's making every player better now at the moment, and it's nice to see how he does it. And I think it's not a question about young and old or German or English. He's putting the players there where they are best, and this is what he can do. He has the eye to see when he has an idea. So I think there are 2 or 3 players missing for his plan. But I think what he has done before with the team he had, you see he has a clear plan.
Christian, that idea that he helps the players along, is that something that's followed Thomas Tuchel along throughout his entire career? I recall one game where Callum Hudson-Odoi was taken on in a game by Tuchel and then replaced half an hour later against Southampton. And Tuchel kind of apologised in the post-match interview, said he didn't treat the player right, and then started Hudson-Odoi in the very next game. So clearly his man management and player management is a strong focus. Is that something that's always been the case with Thomas Tuchel throughout his career?
Yeah, he's very, very straight. And so to come back on the sporting directors, he's also always straight to everybody. And not everybody likes to hear that. And the players have to, because he's the boss. So that makes it easier. And another example, we hear, I don't know if you heard it in England, but it was a big topic in Germany when Werner was playing on the wrong side of the pitch. And he's screaming over and say, hey, what are you doing there? He doesn't care if anybody listens, because if something went wrong, he's saying it directly. And I think that's a very important point on a manager. If you're always direct and honest, then it works. It's not good if you say, I will let you play in the next match and the player is sitting outside. This is often the problem. But he's saying, hey, this was wrong, you're out. And next time you be in again, and next time he is in, so no problem for everybody.
It does seem that they have an ability to counterattack on a level maybe just a little bit below, but close to Liverpool of a couple of seasons ago. Like, the pace in their attackers is incredible. We saw them sting Atletico Madrid twice last night. And this is the sort of style of football that might just get them all the way in the Champions League. I don't think many people would have predicted this under Frank Lampard, for example, that Chelsea would have had a prayer in this competition.
Yes, I think it's a mixture. He let the players play. I think it's a little bit Liverpool and it's a little bit Manchester City. And this is a very good combination, I think. And, he's a good friend of Pep Guardiola. When they were both coaches in Germany, they met sometimes. I remember a story, they were meeting in a restaurant and the waitress was wondering because they don't eat. They were just sitting there and made some things with the salt and the pepper and say, hey, the salt is this player and you have to play like that. So you're seeing it's a very high level and very, very focused on football. And he has an idea which is a little bit between the idea of Klopp and the idea of Pep. So that could be very successful also in Champions League,
So Pep was a bit of a mentor to him in Germany.
I think a friend. They're not the same. They're a little bit the same of craziness because they can be 2 persons in one when they're on the pitch, crazy, and beside the pitch, quiet and gentlemanlike. So, but they're on one level about the thinking about football, and so they're still in contact. And I think if Pep Guardiola says, "Oh, this is a coach who has the same mind like me," it's always a good signal.
I think using salt shakers to have a conversation about football is the most Pep Guardiola and the most Thomas Tuchel thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That is very much fitting with the stereotype. Christian, we wanted to chat to you a little bit about Bayern Munich, and I know we want to chat about some of the content in your paper this week about Robert Lewandowski. Klopp has come out and said that Robert Lewandowski is the best player he's ever managed. He looks like a player with almost a point to prove again this season, because if there was a Ballon d'Or last year, he obviously would have got it. Now he feels that because there is going to be a Ballon d'Or this year, he needs to ensure that he gets his hands on that trophy. So this guy is going out and he's going to try and dominate for the rest of the season.
Yes, he's now on the level he always wanted to be. You know that he often thought about making a transfer to Real Madrid because he thought, why I don't winning the Ballon d'Or? Ronaldo, Messi, they're in bigger clubs perhaps. I have to change. The focus is more there than not in Bundesliga. But it was very important for him to win already the FIFA Player of the Year award. So I think, of course, he will do the next one because he's the player at the moment. And when was Jürgen chatting? He was chatting indeed with Lothar Matthäus, not with me. I was just sitting beside because Lothar Matthäus will be 60 on Sunday. And he was head of our magazine for 1 week. And it was very interesting because Jürgen said for Lothar, I would do everything. And you see, if a player or coaches, as you like, are talking to each other, they're perhaps answering a little bit more about what they think if there's a journalist. So it was very interesting what he was saying about Robert Lewandowski. And he said already when Lewandowski went from Dortmund to Munich, he was complete. And now he's better than before. So this is also, I think, he educated and he's working always on every skill, Robert. And he's now over 30 and he's still working on him. So let's see, this is a kind of way you just hear from Ronaldo.
Yeah, I was literally just about to make that comparison, that Ronaldo is the only other player you can compare him to, that level of work rate and that level of unbelievable improvement even beyond the age of 30.
Yes, and it's so interesting about Robert. I know his wife, Anna, she's very good on food things. I don't know. She has a food line, Health with Anna, Health by Anna. And when you were talking about with her, what Robert is eating, it's totally crazy. So eating fresh meat in the morning, not cooked. He's starting with the dessert and then eating the menu from the other side. So he's really looking at everything he does in his whole life. When she's not there, she's cooking a completely freezer full of food, which he can make himself, that he always has really what he needs. She's making energy balls, very special ones, before the match for him. So he's also, I can tell you how he's sleeping is also crazy. So he's doing really everything to be fit. And he made a test, indeed, a body test. And the result was that his body is, I think, 3 or 4 years younger than he should be. So you see, he's totally fit. So I hope he's getting more better than he is already.
Wow. So Robert Lewandowski is 28 years old, is what you're telling us this morning.
Yes, that's true.
Just to clarify something there, the breakfast, do you mean raw meat, like uncooked meat?
Yeah, like tartar. He's eating tartar in the morning, raw meat.
Right.
Just he's putting it then through the machine every morning, some beef, and he likes it. I won't do that in the morning, but I like it in the evening. But I'm not playing football on this level.
Christian, just on Lewandowski, and he was asked really interestingly in that interview with Lothar Matthäus about his heroes and his striking idols growing up, and I know Thierry Henry was mentioned as well. But interestingly, there was a real Italian flavour, if you excuse the food pun, to his heroes as well growing up. That there was a couple of top Italian strikers that he really, really looked up to.
Jürgen, you mean?
No, sorry, Robert Lewandowski in his piece with Lothar Matthäus. He talked about Del Piero and Baggio as two of his heroes growing up.
Yes, yeah, that was his youth, and I think this is so interesting because he's always now he's the best at the moment. If you believe the FIFA, don't believe the FIFA in this case, yes, but he's still looking at now on Ronaldo and Messi and said, no, they're bigger than me, so I have to do more things to sit on their table. So this is so interesting. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't think he's the superstar, but he has very, very high targets, and he's always working on that. And other players you ask like him, who do you like when you were young? Oh, no, I don't compare me with anybody, I myself. But he's really open-minded and has very, very big respect on other strikers and on football. And indeed, he's I think he was wearing, when he was, I saw a photo, he was wearing, when he was a young boy already, dress of German national team from 1990, so not from Italy. So perhaps it was from Lothar Matthäus, I'm not sure. But so you see, he has football in his heart, and that's nice to see.
As you mentioned there, Matthäus was also speaking to Jurgen Klopp. He gave a little bit more detail in your magazine on his idea of when he's going to become Germany boss, or if he's going to become Germany boss. He says that I didn't want to become national coach. It's not that, but it's that I cannot become Germany national boss at the moment. What is the situation with this role at the moment, Christian? Who is looking likely to take it? And is Jurgen Klopp one day going to become Germany manager in your view?
Yeah, I'm so sure. There are not so many things I'm so sure in football, but one day Jurgen Klopp will be our manager from the German national team. And you said it already. He told Lothar, it's not like I don't want to, I can't. And I think this is another big part of Jurgen Klopp. Another one would say, hey, we have a crisis here. Perhaps they take another coach. No, he said, it's my team, and I don't let the team now alone. I brought them in trouble. I take them out from trouble. And another thing he said was that he made a promise to his wife. So even if he would be fired, we don't hope that, he had to make a sabbatical because he promised to his wife. So it won't work in this time now. It's not the moment for Jurgen Klopp. He would like to, but it doesn't work. But we don't know which will be the next manager in Germany. And I think it will be Hansi Flick. He is also contracted Bayern Munich, but Bayern Munich says no at the moment. So if that also won't work, perhaps you need a coach or a manager, you say, who may do it perhaps till 2022, the Qatar World Cup, and perhaps after that, perhaps Jurgen Klopp has time. So and Lothar Matthäus is one of the solutions we expect. So he has said to me, of course, I would do it also for 2 years. Perhaps it's earlier Jurgen Klopp as we think.
On that sabbatical point, Christian, that you make there, that Jurgen Klopp is talking about, is your sense then that he's very keen to take that maybe next year? Like if he sees his contract out until the summer of 2022, which is when his current deal expires, is your gut feeling that sabbatical will come at that point? And he'll see out maybe 1.5 more seasons at Liverpool, or do you think he'll renew and extend his deal at Liverpool?
I think if he would win everything again this season, perhaps then he would have quit. But Jurgen Klopp is not a manager who say it's not the perfect end for me and now I go. So if he won't be fired, I think it's for sure that he will be the coach next year as well. But I don't believe, and I believe that since month, I think in the moment he signed the new contract, he already knew that he won't fulfill it. He made it because then there's not any rumors around. It's quiet to work, but it's a long time. And I think he will do his sabbatical before this 2024. And so we have to see. But at the moment, he won't go with this result. So I think he will take the sabbatical, but not at the moment. So next year, I think there's still manager of Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp.
Christian, you mentioned Hansi Flick there as a potential next German manager, but given the exit at the group stage in the World Cup in Russia in 2018, where does this position of German manager sit with the public at the moment? Is there a lot of pressure on who comes in as the next manager, or is it the case that maybe there's a slight bit of pressure off, considering the exit at the World Cup the last time out maybe makes the expectations a little bit lower, or are expectations always high in the German job?
Yeah, if you're the manager of Germany, so it doesn't count if you play against the Fiji Islands or anybody else. You always have to win. And Hansi Flick, he won everything with Bayern Munich, so he showed it. He was assistant of Jogi Löw when the World Championship in Brazil when they won. So he doesn't care who's the next team he's playing or if it's difficult or not. Which is important for him. He knows the team. Many players of the German national teams are from Bayern Munich. So it was very, very easy for him to switch. and he knows the structures of our German FA. So it would be perfect, but it's not so easy to change if your club says no, and they have to talk. They did it not at the moment. I know that Rummenigge, the CEO of Bayern Munich, is the man who is the closest one to him. He says, no, we don't want to lose him. But Rummenigge is leaving the club at the end of the year, and this also Hansi Flick knows. So is that what will be after? I don't know if the new boss is quite the same, if we have the same relationship. I don't know if I can work as I like then in the next season, because when you look about the past of Hansi Flick, he worked as sporting director for the German national team. He worked as sporting director of Hoffenheim, Bundesliga club. And always when he saw that, no, they don't like the way I do, he quit. And he doesn't look if there is a difficult tournament or if he is losing money or if he has a new job. He says, no, I have my philosophy and I will do it like that, or I don't do it.
Christian, people who follow you on Twitter will know that you have the inside track on a lot of transfers. I dare say this summer, Erling Haaland is going to feature in a few of your tweets. Have you got any insight into what direction those tweets are going to be going this summer?
I think this will be a lot of not truths. I know that the Premier League and the top clubs are looking on him. I heard about the rumors about changing, making a swap deal, Haaland, Werner. So not true. I say it again. The only chance for the Premier League clubs is that Dortmund, they're not doing so well at the moment. If they miss the qualification of the Champions League, I think then they are in trouble. Not just because of money, because they have still money, but it's very difficult to keep a player like Haaland if he doesn't show him and his skills in Champions League. I think there's a really big chance that Sancho will leave. I had a talk, so I think this would be okay for Dortmund this summer. Last summer it was important to keep him, but now perhaps the way is free for a transfer. But for Haaland, they will fight, and his release clause is not for this year; it's for next year. So it's getting difficult to get him. But you know, if they don't play Champions League next year, I have to change in a true.
Okay, so you think that if Dortmund qualify for the Champions League, he's staying put?
Yeah, I think then he will stay. Then there are not so many opportunities because the bosses of Dortmund don't want to sell him at the moment, and sure. They need him. So I don't think it will happen this summer.
And just that kind of has done the rounds in the last two has been Jesse Marsch, and I know he's doing an extraordinary job at both Salzburg and Austria at the moment. Has that experience under his with Leipzig before that. Do you think there's any truth to these rumours linking Jesse Marsch to Celtic, or do you think maybe a return to a job in the Bundesliga might be more to his liking?
Yeah, very difficult questions. There are many rumours about Jesse Marsch at the moment. I was talking with him a few weeks ago. I have the feeling that he wants to do the next step in Bundesliga. He's looking forward to be a coach there. But he was linked also with Gladbach. I don't think it will happen. Leipzig, yes, there is a coach at the moment, It could happen if Flick will be manager of the German national team. Julian Nagelsmann could be a target of Bayern Munich. So there would be a position for Jesse Marsch. But if there is not a position for him in Bundesliga, it could happen. Glasgow is a big club. It's interesting for him. It's his language. But if he has the opportunity, nothing against the Scottish league, but if you have been manager in the Austrian league, it's not such a big league. There are 1-2 big clubs, and the other ones are really small. I think it's a little bit in Scotland like that. So I think he want to be a coach now in one of the big leagues. But if there's no position for him in the Bundesliga or any other interesting club, why not? I heard the Premier League is for him also very interesting, but he would like to do the next step in Bundesliga. But sometimes you can't choose. But I'm sure that he want to leave Salzburg this summer, and then we have to see the offers.
Christian, you've been very good with your time. Just one very final quick point. Just you mentioned Sancho there. There's a good chance he's going to leave Dortmund this summer. Are Manchester United still the front runners to secure the signing of Jadon Sancho?
That depends on Manchester United. I'm not sure if they still want to pay so much money at the moment. It was getting quiet. The last things I heard that they want to try to make a deal in winter. It didn't happen yet. Perhaps they looked at the first part of his season. He was not so good at the moment. There were a little bit problems, I would tell, with his weight. And but now he's playing good. So why not?
Right. Christian Falk, Head of Football at Sport Build. Thank you so much.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks a million. Christian Falk there on the line, giving us the inside track on what might happen this summer. You get the sense it's going to be a busy enough summer once again in the transfer window. Right, let's tell you what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. At 10:30, the Cheltenham show is live with Paddy Power, with John Duggan, Johnny Ward, Tom Malone and more. Don't feel like a punter, feel like a favourite this Cheltenham. At 12 o'clock then, we are live with the SixNations show with Neil Tracy and guests. And then from 1 o'clock, OTB Gold with Mick O'Connell and his 80th birthday party interview with Joe Malloy and Ger Gilroy. 3 o'clock then is the history of sport with Paul Rouse. 4 o'clock then is a retro panel capturing some of the great sporting moments. And 6 o'clock is OTB Gold, Wexford 1956, with some of the stars of that team that beat Cork on that occasion. And then from 7 o'clock tonight, OTB is live as ever on your radios and on the OTB Sports app. Right now, though, right here on OTB AM, we want to bring you a really interesting chat with author and sports historian Cormac Moore about partition and Irish football.
OTB AM.
Okay, so as you probably know, it is 100 years since the partition of Ireland. It's also 100 years since the Irish soccer split. And Cormac Moore is a historian, an author, and has literally written the book on the subject. I'm delighted to welcome him back to the show now. Cormac, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Eoin.
So take us back to the Irish Cup semi-final of 1921. For people who don't know the story, what happened?
So in January, the Irish Football Association, the IFA, which was the governing body for the whole island of Ireland at that stage, its protest and appeals committee decided, because of the unrest in Dublin, because of the war of independence that was happening at that time, it was too unsafe for teams to travel from the north to Dublin. And it stipulated that all cup competitions would be played in Belfast. So in March 1921, March 7th, Shelbourne played Glenavon, a Lurgan-based team. They played each other in Belfast, and it ended up a draw. Now, the Shelbourne and Leinster Football Association automatically assumed, because it was a draw, the replay would be held in Dublin. That was the norm, going back the last 40 years. However, the IFA decided, no, you have to come back to Belfast again. And Shelbourne decided, with the support of the Leinster Football Association, that they wouldn't go back, and they were subsequently disqualified from the Irish Cup. But what happened afterwards was that the Leinster Football Association decided to leave the IFA and subsequently formed the Football Association of Ireland, the FAI, a number of months later.
How much were these sort of tensions simmering under the surface up until this point, that if it wasn't going to be this incident, it would have been another incident weeks or months later?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point, Eoin. This was just a catalyst, but the reality was there was a lot of bitterness between Dublin and Belfast. Most Dublin supporters and administrators and footballers believed that there was a Belfast bias within the IFA in terms of who got selected for the Irish team in international matches, the venues for when Ireland held matches, the actual representation in the IFA Council and its subcommittees. There seemed to be a very strong bias towards Belfast clubs and personnel. And if it didn't happen in 1921, it more than likely would have happened in some other juncture.
I know you've made the point before that the Irish soccer split and the partition of Ireland on a political level are totally different things. That, of course, there was plenty of politics happening in the football associations themselves, but it was a different sort of politics. At the same time, I'm curious to know how those in Belfast, first of all, were leaning politically. Was it a largely unionist cohort of people running football in Belfast?
Yeah, no, and I have argued, and if, in my PhD thesis I've argued, as well as my book, The Irish Soccer Split, that the primary reason for the soccer split was internal politics. But that is not to say that there were no other factors like the national political environment. And yes, most of the administrators from Belfast were unionists in outlook. For example, James Wilton, the chairperson, he had been in the UFF. He subsequently became the Ulster Unionist councillor and Lord Mayor of Derry City. And many of the other personnel were unionists in outlook. Even though they were unionists in outlook, they still didn't believe that football should be partitioned. They still believed Ireland should remain, all of Ireland should remain in the Empire, and they wanted football to remain an All-Ireland body. They were, and they stuck with the name, the Irish Football Association. They believed they had the right to select players from all over the island up until they were stopped doing that by FIFA. But although they're unionists in outlook, they still believed the IFA should be an All-Ireland body. But one of the reasons for the split was certainly the Dublin administrators and supporters and footballers believed it was a unionist organisation. In fact, there had been an incident just a month previously in February 1921 at an amateur international in Paris between France and Ireland, where tricolours were held aloft by some fans, and the IFA had those fans removed from the ground. And this did not go down well in Dublin at all, within the Dublin-based media or with supporters and administrators.
So you had people basically representing the IFA, representing people all across the island who had travelled to Paris but had a unionist mentality and completely rejected the idea of a tricolour being flown from a supporter who was supporting an all-island team.
Yeah, but the IFA said that, we're not a political body, but this ran counter to that. It tended to go against symbols of nationalism, whereas, playing God Save the King, they had no problem with it, or flying the Union Jack, they had no problem with it. So there was this kind of skewing towards unionist or British symbols as opposed to Irish symbols. And then we also had the case of Belfast Celtic, the most nationalist-leaning club in Belfast. It always felt it was on the wrong end of, in terms of receiving punishment. And it disbanded actually in 1920 for 4 years because of the troubles in Belfast. And the way it felt it was being treated by the IFA. And it's also important to note that even though the IFA claimed there was a lot of violence in Dublin, it seemed to ignore there was a lot more violence amongst civilians in Belfast at the time. In fact, there was a curfew in Belfast for much of this time because of the civilian violence. And one of the administrators, Mr. Beggs, he actually got injured by gunshot wounds. So to say that there was only violence in Dublin and not in Belfast at the time, just beggars belief, considering what was happening in the north at the time.
Because that was their official reason for not going to Shelbourne for that 1921 Cup semi-final. It was too dangerous, essentially, was their excuse.
Exactly, and Shelbourne said it. Look, we went up to Belfast, and Belfast is in many ways more dangerous than Dublin. So why can't Belfast teams come to Dublin?
What was the story with Belfast Celtic?
Well, there was a lot of sectarian tension in Belfast between Belfast Celtic and some of the unionist-leaning clubs like Linfield and Glentoran. And there was a really ugly incident in 1920 where there was a huge riot, gunshots were fired. There was a lot of imagery and flags being used of the political situation at the time, and the Belfast Celtic were blamed for that riot, and it actually went to court against the IFA, and ultimately decided look, it was just better to disband whilst the city was so unsettled. So it kind of moved away from football for those 4 years. But it came back and had a very successful period afterwards until it finally disbanded for good in the late 1940s.
So that period between 1924, you said, and 1940s for Belfast Celtic, there was still an avenue for people under the banner of under the banner not of the IFA, but obviously of those running football from Leinster to actually have a team based in Belfast, so that there was an avenue for the nationalist community within Belfast to have their own team, except for that 4-year window, I assume.
Well, there were other nationalist clubs that sprung up. former players of Belfast Celtic played for some of those nationalist clubs. In fact, the FAI, which also shows the FAI was not a partitionist body. When it initially was formed, it was formed as the governing body for all of football in Ireland, and it accepted 23 clubs from the 6 counties, including Alton United. Alton United were a club based in Belfast who had some players who previously played for Belfast Celtic. They actually won the second FAI Cup in 1923 to beat Shelbourne in the final. So, it actually did accept teams from the north into its fold. However, when it was seeking international recognition, FIFA stipulated that the FAI would have to change its name, first of all, to the Football Association of the Irish Free State, but also it could only allow clubs that were from the 26 counties into its fold. So the 23 clubs that had been in the FAI were no longer part of the FAI from 1923.
Was there a suspicion within the IFA that those running football from Dublin and from Leinster were of a nationalist mindset?
I think maybe there was a suspicion, because there certainly were some nationalists, say from an administration point of view, but you'd find whilst most personnel in the IFA Council in Belfast were unionist leaning, it's very different with Leinster Football Association. You had Jewish people there, you had Home Rulers, you had Sinn Féiners, you had Protestants, you had Catholics, so you had a really big mix of different kind of identities within Dublin, more so than you had in Belfast. So I think I didn't see that in the evidence I've seen. I haven't seen much evidence that the Belfast people felt the Dublin administrators were nationalist leaning. They never wanted him to leave, and they tried on many attempts afterwards to get the Dublin people back in. And they actually offered him, and what would have resolved the problem was that if it had been done earlier, they actually gave them equality of status to a large degree only once Leinster left. They should have done that beforehand. They should have given proper representation on the IFA Council and subcommittees. They should have given them more matches to Dublin and more representation for Dublin-based players. If they had done that, there probably wouldn't have been a split. And it could have been resolved from 1921 to 1932 if an agreement had been reached sooner and based more on equality of status between Belfast and Dublin. They were the primary reasons why the split happened in the first place, and why it has been maintained since then for the last 100 years.
Why do things change then into the 30s, and why was this situation unsalvageable at that point?
Well, you'd have to blame both, I would say, both associations, not just the IFA. The IFA genuinely wanted United Ireland football team and football organisation. They did give a lot of concessions to the FAI, but there was 2 conferences where it seemed a deal was close at hand. First of all, in 1924, when the IFA offered the FAI practically equality of status, but the chairman would remain the IFA chairman, they decided in the last minute that they weren't going to accept it. And then in 1932, at the final major conference, it looked like another deal was signed because the chairman would be alternated between Dublin and Belfast, but then the FAI asked that they would get a seat on the International Football Association board. That's the board that still exists today, which makes up the rules for soccer, and which the IFA is still a member of. But then the IFA said, no, you're not getting one of our 2 seats, and that's when the talks collapsed. The IFA felt there was no point going back to them. The FAI tried a number of attempts in the 30s and other decades, but it became a really frosty relationship between both associations, and it wasn't helped by the fact both jurisdictions were selecting players for both international teams. So you had a situation in 1946 where Jackie Carey, the famous Manchester United player, on the weekend he played for an Ireland team against England from the IFA in Belfast, and then a few days later he played for an Ireland team from Dublin, an FAI selected team, against England in Dublin. So you had that happening quite a bit. And it was only during the Troubles when attempts were made to actually try to see could we get an All Ireland international team. Had about 10 conferences, but the political climate and other factors prevented that from happening.
Very interesting. The IFAB situation there is quite telling of the whole political importance that people had in their own role, I guess, with IFA or with international corporations, that the final straw was taking one of our 2 international seats. And with the big boys, I don't know where their headquarters is, London or somewhere else in maybe Switzerland somewhere. But that was the thing that stuck in the craw of the IFA, is telling about the notions, I guess, of the football administrators at the time.
Yeah, it does. But in fairness, I know my issue with the FAI in asking for that extra seat was they asked for it at the very last moment when a deal had almost been signed. But it was legitimate for them to ask for that seat, because if they hadn't asked for it, then they would have been, minnows in many respects to the IFA, and that was their reasoning for asking for it. They wanted total equality of status between Dublin and Belfast, and in fact, they could argue they had more right to more equality, because the area they governed was far bigger in size than the north. But obviously, the IFA was an old, established body with very strong relationships with the FAs in England, Scotland, and Wales, and it didn't want to relinquish any of its power or its kind of contacts as well.
It must have been pretty frustrating to be an Irish football fan around that time, seeing things like the World Cup take off and FIFA take off, and throughout the 30s and 40s, for the majority of the 40s anyway, not even being allowed to play some of the home nations, in inverted commas, until the British associations, I think, in 1946 officially recognised the FAI in a way that allows them to actually play games against Ireland. Yeah,
well, the British FAs actually recognised the FAI in late 1923, but they give them dominion status, which meant that the IFA was seen as the full association for Ireland and could select Irish players. And that was the reason why England, Scotland and Wales would not play an FAI Irish team. But also the British associations had their own problems with FIFA as well. First of all, they didn't... they actually left FIFA when the Central Powers, after the First World War, were allowed back into FIFA soon after the First World War. And secondly, in late 1920s, 1928, they also left FIFA again because there was some haziness in relation to the amateur rule. FIFA allowed players who got time off work were given expenses. That was seen as professionalism by the British Association, so they actually left. So they weren't in FIFA until after the Second World War. And the Irish, the FAI decided not to send a team to Uruguay for the first World Cup. They could have. There was only 13 teams in that World Cup, and they decided it was too expensive, and they didn't send the team. And they actually lost out to Norway in qualifying for 1934 World Cup. So they had very, very late entries to the World Cup, as you know, not until 1990 getting to the competition. Whereas Northern Ireland had a very successful tournaments in 58 and 82.
God, that's in hindsight. Where was the fundraising team at for that 1930 World Cup?
Exactly. Well, it would have been a great, because any team that participated in it, benefited from it. I think there was 4 teams from Europe, and even the King of Romania paid for the Romanian squad to go there. So it was certainly, on hindsight, they certainly should have made a lot more effort to. And even in 1950, they could have had a chance to go to the World Cup, and they would have made a lot of money out of that, and they turned that down as well. So there was a few missed opportunities for the Irish team there, World Cups.
And was that team in 1930 or 1950 any good? Would they have maybe could they have been the precursor to the great Irish teams of the 80s and 90s?
Well, I think they would have been okay, yeah, because they did quite well against teams like Belgium, the Netherlands in the late 20s. Obviously, football had originated in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland pretty much before anywhere else. So they would have been playing, a lot of those players, or would have been playing against good competition. Obviously, a lot of those players were in clubs in England as well, and Scotland. So definitely would have had an advantage over some of the continental teams. They played Italy a couple of times in the late 1920s, and I think they lost on both occasions. But Italy obviously won 2 World Cups in a row, in 1934.
Yeah, so they were putting their wits up against some of the best in the world at that point. Just to bring this full
English, obviously we have to add a caveat. At that time, the British associations weren't in those tournaments, so
sure.
But they were under splendid isolation and felt they were superior to every other country. But obviously, once they did enter the World Cup, they got kicked out of the first round. Losing to the USA, England did 1950. So.
Yeah, a real tragedy, that one. So just to bring this full circle then, 1921, this month, 100 years ago, that cup semi-final and that Shelbourne versus Glenavon game, which precedes the Irish soccer split. What happens thereafter? Who actually wins that Irish Cup, actually, is one question I had to finish up on.
Yeah, they're actually at Glentoran.
Glentoran, right.
Glenavon got to the final because Shelbourne were disqualified, and Glentoran won 2-0 against Glenavon.
Right. And was that Shelbourne team any good thereafter? Do you remember, or do you know rather?
Yeah, I think they didn't win many early leagues or FAI Cups, but they had won the Irish Cup in 1920, the year before. Right. So they would have assumed if Glenavon came to Dublin, they would have won that, and then they would have played Glentoran in the final. So there would have been a good chance for him to retain the trophy. Yes, I know. Who knows? But how good they could have been, or what they could have achieved in the All Ireland kind of Irish Football League basis. But as I said, they did lose the FAI Cup final in 1923 against Alton United, which was a huge shock at the time. Right. Well, Cormac, this is fascinating stuff as ever. It's great catching up with you. Just a reminder as well, the Irish Soccer Split is your book. People can check that out if they give it a Google. They can get it on all the regular online bookstores. It's actually been republished in paperback format. It should be available in the next couple of weeks. So the 100th anniversary edition. Brilliant. And make sure to give Cormac a follow on Twitter as well. I'm sure we'll catch up again over the next little while. The contemporary version of this conversation is one that pops up every now and again. And sure, don't we have a joint World Cup to look at over the next couple of years as well? The 100th anniversary of the World Cup in Ireland and Britain. It's going to be great. Cormac Moore, thanks a million. Thanks, Owen.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
In the lead up to a CheltenhamFestival, Barry, is it like the All-Ireland final for a player? Like they're getting hassled for tickets. Are you just getting hassled for tips? Are you meeting people at the airport? Can you take it in your stride, or do you feel actually more pressure given the week that's in it?
It's about 28 All-Ireland finals, but lads love it. There's a great buzz, there's a great atmosphere. You've grown up loving it, watching it. Now you're part of it.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Well, yesterday was bloody frustrating when it came to the nap of the day. Kilcrush beaten by Sir Gerhard in our charity bet with Paddy Power. It wasn't the worst day. We Bob Ollinger was a favourite that won, and we had also On the Slopes placed at 20-1. So the face is washed pretty much for the first 2 days. No brilliance, but nothing like terrible either. So we'll hopefully get some winners today. Remember to gamble responsibly. Never gamble more than you can afford, folks. Maybe €1 each way here or there. Have a bit of interest in Cheltenham today. Each way day. Thursday's always an absolute minefield. You got Envo Allen in the first race, should win, but then the rest of the card is like an each way day. But if you get one or two of these each way horses, it can make your week, and that's what we're going to try and do today. All of my tips are live now on the OTB website, otbsports.com. Go there now to the racing section, and also the OTB app. If you have downloaded it, do download it if you haven't already, and you can check out all of the selections for the day there. I'll give an explanation on them in the Cheltenham show at 10:30 with Tom Malone presenting, Johnny Ward, Paddy Power, Gina Bryce. We're going to have an in-depth conversation between 10:30 and 11:30. The nap of the day, Mellon do it, 2:30 each way. Ryanair Chase 6.5-1 is Mellon. Mellon has gone to the festival and has been second 4 times. Twice second in the champion hurdle, second in a supreme novices, and second as well last year in the Marsh novices chase. So the horse will be ridden positively by Brian Cooper. I think the ground will suit him. I think he ran a great race in the Dublin race in Christmas in the Savills Chase behind Ken Boy and a Plutard, the winner. So I think Mellon has got form if he goes out in front, and I think he's definitely got an each way chance because he likes Cheltenham, he liked the ground. This could be Mellon's day. Let's hope it is. He's the nap of the day. And just remember, folks, our coverage in association with Paddy Power. Don't feel like a punter. Feel like a favourite this Cheltenham.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Tom Watson, you're welcome to Golf Weekly.
Hey, this is going to be fun.
Very happy to say European captain and, of course, 3-time major winner Padraig Harrington joins us.
Today's special guest on Golf Weekly is Lee Westwood.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm honoured and delighted.
Let's bring in Paul McGinley, who joins us now. Paul, you're very welcome.
Shane Lowry, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thanks, yeah. Well, I'm as good as I can be.
The biggest names in golf and Ireland's best golf podcast, Golf Weekly, now exclusively available on Patreon. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly to sign up now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're welcome back. It is 9 minutes past 9 on this Thursday morning. You're watching OTB AM. And just a reminder that if you've missed anything this morning, you can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we've been chatting to Christian Falk this morning. We've been chatting to Ugo Monye this morning. And we brought you an interview with author and historian Cormac Moore just a short time ago. Sue Murphy will join us in a few minutes for the OTB TV picks, where we'll get stuck into Drive to Survive. Shane Hannon, you're a super fan of that, I understand as well. But one thing I want to put to you before that, Shane, is new comments from Diarmuid Connolly. He's got a brand new podcast out at the moment with Jonathan Courtney called JCDC Aum Show podcast. And he has basically admitted that the extensive ban in 2017 contributed to his decision that he needed a break in 2018. So with a lot of Diarmuid Connolly stuff, I guess he hasn't shed too much light on it. He doesn't do a whole pile of media. And it's interesting looking at his comments. He said, it was a lot of things. Certainly the game against Carlow didn't help my mindset, and it probably did influence my decision a small bit. I remember coming back the following season and I was just demotivated. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be there. It just was that I wasn't the same person there around the guys. When I was training, I wasn't putting it in like I used to. I wasn't doing my extra bits and all that sort of stuff. So you can check out that podcast for all these comments. But Shane, what I always find interesting about Connolly is that he is heralded as one of the most talented footballers of his generation, because he is one of the most talented footballers of his generation. But what I feel he doesn't get enough credit for is the unbelievable level of work that he would have had to put in to get to that level of apparent talent, the standards that were required in the Dublin setup, the standards that he would have expected of himself when it comes to his own work rate, and the dedication to the Dublin cause every single year. I think these comments illuminate that a little bit, that Diarmuid Connolly wasn't giving it enough. And while Diarmuid Connolly in that state probably would have walked onto the Dublin team, probably would have walked onto any team of all time, he didn't feel it was enough, which I think underlines just how high his own standards were.
Yeah, and I think there's this air of presenteeism that is kind of surrounds Gaelic football, and this idea that you can't leave, that once you're in the inter-county squad that you're there on merit and you shouldn't leave. But refreshing honesty from Diarmuid Connolly in this podcast, because he's talking about, you mentioned the Carlow game and his reasons for leaving, but encouraging other young players to go abroad and do the J1s, do the 3 months of playing football over in America if you have that opportunity, is quite refreshing to see, because we saw it with Jack McCaffrey as well, that he had good reasons to step away and the commitment just wasn't there. Maybe the love of the game wasn't there. But to hear Diarmuid Connolly say things like, I didn't feel the same around that group of players in terms of not wanting to put the work in. And when you reach that phase as a senior inter-county player, then maybe a trip abroad or even a trip just away from the game, a spell away from the game is the only decision. So really interesting. I guess people hypothesise that maybe the Carlow ban and the extent of that ban would have played on Diarmuid Connolly's mind and led to his decision ultimately. But it's good to see him come out and talk about this a little bit more honestly and kind of give younger players who maybe have fallen out of love with the game that excuse or that reason to maybe take that time out and come back a fresher, better player, I guess.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to Mannion and McCaffrey, they were such heralded players from the moment they came onto the inter-county scene almost. Obviously, their underage teams were very successful. They come into the senior squad and are making waves immediately once they get into the senior squad. There isn't really a break for them at that point where they're feeling their way into the inter-county scene. They're not a fringe player for any section of their career, so to speak. And as a result of that, you probably get to a stage midway through your career and you almost have to deliberately take yourself out of that. And Connolly is the same. Like, obviously, a prodigious talent like him, his first couple of years in Dublin wouldn't have had the same level of success that McCaffrey and Mannion would have had. But within Dublin, I'm sure he's being held up as one of the most important players in the squad within the first couple of years that he's playing there. So that's difficult for anybody to almost be forced into that, to get carried away on the wave of being a top-class inter-county footballer at the very start, that midway through it, you're probably looking around and saying, God, is this the thing that I want to dedicate my entire 20s to, for example?
Yeah, and the fact that he talks about being the number one guy, or he says, I wasn't the number one guy anymore when I came back, but I still had to train like I was the number one guy. And that time away gave him that perspective, because Diarmuid Connolly was the first name in the Dublin team sheet for years. And, when he had that ban and he lost the motivation a little bit, as he says, to come back and to get back into that training like he is the number one guy when he knows he's not anymore and he has to fight for his place is refreshing. And the fact is as well, Dublin is the toughest team to walk away from, because he'll look back on his career in 10, 15, 20 years time and say, okay, maybe there was a couple of All-Irelands there that I didn't win because of stepping away. But the fact is, you can't look back with those regrets. He will look back now and say, as he said, the travel gave him a broader scope on the world, a broader scope on life. And maybe some things are a little bit more important than winning All-Ireland titles. Some people might disagree with that, but certainly having that fresher sense of the wider world outside of the GEA can only be a good thing for Diarmuid Connolly. So I think this podcast chat is something a lot of GEA players will be sitting reading this morning and listening to this morning and thinking maybe, is this what I want for the next year or two of my life? And lockdown has done that for players anyway, that they've started to maybe recalibrate their thoughts, think about things that are more important to them, family, place, friends, that sort of thing, and maybe a bit of travel as well. So perhaps Diarmuid Connolly's comments in this podcast might change the viewpoint of some top GAA players in the country. We could see an exodus of a few more players once we can all travel again.
Yeah, and I'm sure the pandemic has made everybody think twice about where their status is, where the status of football or hurling is on their priority list as well. Right, it is 16 minutes past 9 on this Thursday morning. We're chatting to Sue next on OTB AM. But first, let's hear from Andy Mitten. The full chat with Joe on last night's football show is well worth checking out, out of Manchester United against AC Milan tonight. Here's what Andy said on what's gone wrong with Donny van de Beek.
Donny van de Beek's had plenty of chances and he's been very average when I've seen him. When you start against Watford in the FA Cup and you're Donny van de Beek, you've got to stand out in games like that. So, in mitigation, I spoke to Stephen Pienaar, who's a coach at Ajax, and he went from Ajax to Dortmund to the Premier League, and he said that step to Germany was really important. It's a big jump to go from Holland to the Premier League. And if you look at how Frankie de Jong did, or Matthijs de Ligt, they struggled in the first season. De Jong's now become a really important player for Barcelona. So maybe best case scenario is Donny van de Beek has a good second season. Like Fred had a really poor first season. He might argue that he's not had enough minutes, and he's right. But when he's had those minutes, he's looked pretty average in most of those matches.
Yeah, Andy Mitten speaking to Joe on last night's football show. As I said, the full thing is available on YouTube. The full thing is available on the OTB Sports app, and it is well worth checking out. Sue Murphy, good morning.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. This is our OTB TV picks. If anybody is joining us for the first time this week, what we do is we go through something that's brand new. We go through something that you might have missed, and then we go and do our catch up as well. What is shiny new this week, Sue?
There's loads, which is great because we've had a kind of starvation of stuff recently. But I think the big one for me is probably Line of Duty, but we'll get to that later because I just saw, before we started, before I came on air, I saw Shane pull out a massive notebook. And he had warned he warned me this is on Drive to Survive, and now I feel like I'm not going to be able to review this. Look at the notebook,
Yeah.
But go on. This is just season 1.
This is so season 1 and 2. If any of my Leaving Cert teachers are watching, they'll be like, "Why didn't he put in this effort for the Leaving Cert?" But anyway, it's I even have the highlighter out. I had the highlighter out throughout season 1 and 2 of Drive to Survive. I could not be more excited for a series of any show than season 3 of Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Yeah. It's unreal. I've seen the first. I'm on the 3rd episode, and I'm not I was a big Formula 1 fan when I was a teenager because everyone was, because Michael Schumacher was driving, and that's all them. But it was just really exciting at the time. And I really felt like the changes to some of the cars and, you know, some of that kind of stuff really took away from the excitement around somebody pipping somebody on the last lap or something like that. But anyway, I watched the first episode on Saturday night and I was hooked. Like, I went straight on to the second episode, went on to the third episode. And like, by the end of the second episode, not knowing much of it, like I knew Lewis Hamilton and some of the main guys, but not knowing much about any of the Formula One stuff, I knew the main drivers, the main cars, like I was totally into it. And like my husband came in and I was like, so this guy doesn't like this guy and these guys don't get on at all and they don't like Mercedes at all. Actually, nobody likes Mercedes at all. And it was totally, like, it's such, they managed to like really build up the drama around the whole Mercedes thing. Like in the first episode, I don't want to give too much away, but like Racing Point, which I heard was their nickname was Tracing Point during the week, which I think is one of the greatest things I've ever heard. But they drove out this new car and like the whole pit just stops and they're all looking at this car and it's all really over dramatic and they're like, it looks exactly like Mercedes. And I was like, does it? I mean, it looks like a nice Formula One car. So like, it's just mad how much, like you have all the stuff that's going on in the track and all these drivers who are concentrating on everything that's going on there. And that's obviously really stressful for them. And then you've all of these guys who are all like infighting and bitching about each other all the time. And it's so entertaining. It's just so brilliant.
Like the money that's involved in Formula One will come as no surprise to anyone. But like one of the highlights from one of the first two seasons was Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal. And in pops out of nowhere, I had no idea his wife was Jerry Halliwell.
Yeah.
Spice, baby spice or ginger spice or whichever spice she is. Like they have this lovely scene where they're sitting in their kitchen at home and almost having just a regular conversation like normal people would have. So you think, oh, they're really down to earth. And then they walk outside to the back garden and get a helicopter from their back garden. And you're just like, these people are living on another level. And like even they have a rivalry between Esteban Ocon, who had quite a poor background compared to Sergio Perez, I think it was, who was backed by the billionaire Carlos Slim. And you just see the money that's involved and the psychology involved as well. They're quite like Gunther Steiner, the Haas team principal, is one of the stars of the opening couple of seasons. He just takes no crap from anybody. And then you've drivers like Romain Grosjean, who of course had the accident not that long ago, and that's one of the things that's covered quite well in season 1 and 2, that the psychology of, if he causes a crash, that's playing on your mind for the next number of races, and you owe it to your team then to not do it again. And that, I can't wait for season 3 because COVID played havoc with this Formula One season. So to see how they manage that and how Romain Grosjean actually survived that crash in recent months will be quite extraordinary. But anyone who hasn't watched it, just get on this show straight away. It's
so brilliant. Like they deal with Australia a good bit because they were there, they were ready to go, and suddenly it's all called off, and they deal with all of the drama and the background that's happening around that. And I thought Lewis Hamilton was brilliant, just going, why the hell are we here? Like, what the hell is going on? But I think they deal with the crash, that fire in episode 9. So it's even if you've no interest in Formula One, it's so well edited, so well put together, and the personalities, like, these are really rich people who are used to getting their way. It's just very, very entertaining. And like they sorry to butt in, but the highlight of the whole thing, if you don't know any Formula One drivers, if maybe your knowledge is only Lewis Hamilton and not much beyond, Daniel Ricciardo, of the Australian, now of McLaren, formerly of Renault, he is just extraordinary. Season 2 opens. He was the highlight of season 1. He's just the cockiest, funniest, classic Aussie guy that you'll ever meet. And he opens season 2. It just his face pops up on screen with a wry smile. He says, "I'm back and I'm still good looking." And you're just like, this guy, I love this guy. I actually bought a Renault t-shirt and hat off eBay about 4 months ago because of him. And a week signed.
But then a week later, as is the case in Formula One, he leaves Renault and joins McLaren. So I'm going to have to buy a McLaren hat, I think.
Shane, you're a Formula One super fan anyway, right?
Yeah, I love Formula One, and like the thing about this show is that it makes it I guess approachable for people who know absolutely nothing about Formula One. Like my in-depth engineering and technical knowledge in Formula One wouldn't be that strong, but this show kind of makes it approachable, and almost like the late Murray Walker would have done on commentary for years, that you're listening to this guy and he's making the sport approachable for people who have absolutely no clue about it. So That's the thing about Formula One Drive to Survive. You can watch it and have absolutely no interest in cars, in motorsport, or in Formula One. And the personalities alone, there's kind of like a Made in Chelsea reality TV show vibe about the whole thing. These guys
really
are having
is.
aggro and back and forths. It's just great. Really, really good.
Oh, and you'll absolutely love it, like.
Yeah, no, I'm looking for. I definitely. It's on the list, that magical list that everybody has for sure. I definitely get into it. This is like really important though for Formula One, isn't it? To have this level of positive publicity around it, like which may be negativity, the inside track to some of the negativity that surrounds it, but ultimately the end game is a positive reaction and a positive outcome for the sport in general. Like you mentioned it yourself there, Sue, like the post Schumacher years haven't been the easiest for Formula One when it comes to appealing to new people. And I think when it comes to some of the hardcore fans, maybe they've been alienated a little bit as well by some of the technical changes in the sport. Again, I'm not a fan or an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but that's certainly the feel I get. However, when it comes to this is the most universally loved thing that Formula One has done in quite some time. This is the first time they've been able to actually tap into non-motorsport fans since Schumacher, it seems.
Yeah, and they make, like, what I like about it is they make the spectacle of Formula One. So, like, everything around the races, the fans, the media, stuff like that, it's absolutely amazing. But they kind of saw what it was doing for the sport. Like, for me, I was like, oh, I'll definitely go back and watch next season. That looks like, I forgot how exciting Formula One can be. And if it's just starting to convert people back, which is a huge thing, and bring new people in. And I think the appeal of it in the first 2 seasons, some of the teams didn't take part, and they were just like, oh no, this isn't for us. And now they're totally seeing how this can just put them directly in front of an audience that probably hasn't interacted with Formula One that much, you know.
So is this out now on Netflix? Is this ready to watch right now, Sue?
Tomorrow. It said 10 episodes tomorrow, but there's 2 seasons already up there, and like, I really want to go back to this. I don't want to go further into it because I want to go back to start and watch everything just to get used to all the personalities. But yeah, I'm just obsessed now, really obsessed.
Weekend sorted, Shane.
Oh, listen, this is the other thing as well, is it's so scarily, some of the drivers are so scarily young. Like Lewis Hamilton is well into his 30s now and is the world champion. But when you look at the grid, I think that one of the stats from one of the previous seasons was that it was actually the final episode of season 1. I think the 2019 lineup on the grid was the youngest since 1950. So half of the drivers were aged 25 or younger. You've guys like the show introduces you to guys like Pierre Gasly and Max Verstappen, Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc, and they look like babies. And these guys are driving cars at speeds around bends and on dangerous tracks that you just wouldn't believe. So it takes a serious amount of bravado to do what they do, and just extraordinary. My next probably 24 hours will be spent watching this show.
Nice one. It sounds like it's a really good way to spend your time. I'm really looking forward to going back and watching the whole thing. Sue, next up we have What You Might Have Missed, and there's an Irish angle to this one on Paddy's Week.
Yeah, I just said I hope that most people have seen this, but it is just so good. And I recently went back and rewatched it myself. Catastrophe. It's on Amazon Prime. This is written by Sharon Horgan and Rob Delaney. Have you guys seen it?
Shamefully going to say I haven't seen it, but it does seem to tick all the boxes.
It's so good. So it's not even that long. It's 4 seasons and it's about 5 or 6 episodes in each season. But basically, Sharon Horgan and Rob Delaney hook up. She ends up getting pregnant, and they just end up like shotgun wedding, and then they kind of fall into this married life. But I remember watching the first season, and I remember like just going, oh, I've never felt myself so represented by a woman before, because she goes through all of the stuff like that women just go through, but like things like hangovers and stuff like that usually don't, like, you're like, yes, women have hangovers. Like, it's just, she's just brilliant and writes it brilliantly. But there's an episode that's in one of the last seasons where she becomes a mother, and I've become a man recently, but it's the idea that you need mammy friends. And I remember watching, she becomes obsessed with getting mammy friends. And I was like, what is this about? Like, surely people have enough friends themselves. They don't need to go find new friends. And then when I had Julia, I was like, people don't understand. I need to go find women. And I went back and watched that episode, and I was like, oh my God, it's so unbelievable. And so it's like the series grows with you. Like, you can go back and watch it, and just every part of your life, it's represented. But like, it hits a punch in some parts as well. Like, her dad dies, and that's a like really tragic thing in the 3rd season. I'm not giving too much away here. And he deals with alcoholism as well across the season. So it's not just the comedy around it, but the comedy around it is just so brilliantly written. And the two of them, like, I really was like, oh, are they involved off air? Because it was so like a husband and wife talking to each other all the time. They have this amazing chemistry, but it's just great. Like, it's 4 seasons, and if you haven't seen it, Sharon Horgan is just an absolute genius. I'm obsessed with her. It's so good.
Brilliant. That's on Amazon Prime at the moment. It is Catastrophe. Finally then, Sue, let's get into our catch-up. What are you going back on? Like, you've got a lot on your plate with all the shiny new and what you might miss stuff. Like, I don't think... Do you have time for catch-up at the moment?
Not really. I've been kind of sticking with Bloodlands. I just watched the last episode last night. So, and I went back and watched Line of Duty season 5 because I've reached a level of obsession that's probably not healthy. But I'm ready for Sunday. But yeah, like, Bloodlands is the main thing. So I know, like, I haven't got back to The Wire. I'm really disappointed in myself. I suppose I'm watching a lot.
The obsession with Line of Duty is something that fascinates. Like, I'm again ashamed to say I haven't seen it yet, but there was one day that Adrian Dunbar appeared in the pre-COVID appeared in the office. So he was in Marconi House, and this Superintendent Ted Hastings that he plays, people are obsessed with him. I mean, people were getting photos with him in the office, and I was like, this guy is like Russell Crowe or the Pope or Tom Cruise might just have walked into the studio. It was incredible. People were just fawning over him.
I love that about him as well, though, because he's had this kind of career, because he was always that character actor who came in, did it like a really good like support third part in a film, and then disappeared again. And now he's the main character in this, and he just goes around shouting about how he's going to get bent coppers all the time, and he's just brilliant. He's so engaging, and you're kind of not sure if he's the one behind the organised crime. Don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it, but his chemistry with the other two and how good he is on screen. There's an episode in the last episode where he's being questioned in a room, and it goes on. I think the scene goes on for about 20 minutes. And that's just unbelievable TV making, and having the confidence to have your last episode a massive question session, and it's so intense and engaging. And he is brilliant. Like, it's rapid fire right across the table constantly. But it's like, if you haven't seen Line of Duty, you're really missing out. Like, there's sometimes when I'm like, that's a bit like shoddily tied together, but you forget about that because the characters are so good and they're so well written and they're so brilliant that doesn't really matter that much.
Shane, what are you watching at the moment?
I've just finished Your Honour, and I know it's something that you have touched on in a previous episode, but yeah, like, I'm a big Bryan Cranston fan, a big Breaking Bad fan, and Your Honour kept me wanting to flick from episode to episode. Like, I'd probably give it a very specific 7.2. My brother, out of 10, my brother gave it a 5.8 or a 5.9. Like, the story kind of, not to give anything away, it goes in arcs. I wasn't sure watching it whether there was going to be a second season or not. And I leave people to, if you aren't aware of that, I leave you to work that out for yourself. But like, Bryan Cranston's acting is obviously class in it. There are a few parallels between his character in Breaking Bad and his character in Your Honour. And it gets a bit sticky, the whole situation they're in, but you feel like there's some plot points just thrown in. I don't know if either of you guys have seen it, but
yeah, I've seen it.
The writing was a little bit lazy, I thought, at times. But having said that, I still enjoyed it, episode to episode.
Yeah, I watched and I've seen the first 2 episodes, and I kind of feel the same way about it. Like, you kind of want to turn on the next episode to see what happens, and you're taken in by Bryan Cranston, but you feel like it's a level below, and you can't really put your finger on it. You're just like, this could be so much better, because I mean, what he's trying to cover up is basically that his son killed another kid, and he's trying to protect him from the biggest mob boss. You're like, this could be really intense, and it's sometimes you're like, that it doesn't quite reach that, but he's really good in it.
Good stuff. Well, maybe it's one of these where, like, Breaking Bad people just all of a sudden realise come season 2 or 3 that it's absolutely sensational. But like, what? Maybe it doesn't get renewed. I don't know what the future holds for this show. Your Honour, you're also watching Succession, Shane. We'll come back to that another day. We are unfortunately out of time. But there's a Succession deep dive that we need to do this morning here on OTB AM, because I think everybody who didn't get to it pre-pandemic got to it during the pandemic. Sue Murphy, thanks a million.
No worries.
Shane Hannon, thanks a million for being with us this morning as well. A pleasure as ever.
Good stuff, Owen. Thanks a million.
That OTB AM has been live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, tomorrow morning on OTB AM, we're chatting rugby with Anna Capeless and Alan Quinlan. There is football with Phil Egan and Daniel Harris. We've got the crappy quiz as well. There is a very, very dramatic crappy quiz coming our way tomorrow morning. Complete and utter meltdown is happening on the crappy quiz tomorrow morning. You don't want to miss that. Right now, though, we're bringing you Andy Dunne and Will Greenwood, two former Harlequins teammates, talking Ireland against England in the Six Nations.
We came third in the 2004 Six Nations post-World Cup, right? We came third. That finished about 10 of us. So if you put it into context, that if England lose to Ireland on the weekend and Scotland duff up Italy, England come fifth. So when we came third, that finished it finished Woodward. So you just got to understand, when you're that punchy as a nation in terms of numbers and structure and funding, you can't come fifth in the Six Nations, which is what could happen if England lose to Ireland.
Well, Will, could I...
And not be under pressure. I mean, well, you don't get a free ticket in life to have a free run and lose. Let's lose games. And you know what? I'll see you out in 2023. We'll all just rock up and have a crack, shall we?
Well, no, it's an interesting little juxtaposition in that Ireland, there is more leeway, it seems, to underperform. Certainly a season where we underperform does not necessarily, it certainly doesn't see the end of 10 international careers. We don't shift in numbers like that. We're a much slower moving organism. We don't change in that way. I mean, the last time we had a real sea change in selection was way back when Gatland was in charge of the Irish team, and he shipped off about 7-8 players and he brought in Stringer and O'Gara to start. He brought in Shane Horgan, John Hayes, Simon Easterby. He brought in 5 or 6 uncapped players, and we ended up having those fellas went on in 70, 80 caps each. But that's probably the last major clear out in a post the Six Nations or tournament that I can recall. Irish rugby, I think, culturally tends to be slower in terms of transition with selection and form. So there is pressure, I think, on Farrell, but it doesn't appear to me to be the same type of pressure. I don't think it's as finite. I mean, what I would say there'd be significant pressure on Farrell after this Saturday if we play in the same manner that we've played against England the last 4 times in a row, and we've been absolutely steamrolled because we've tried to take on a juggernaut by being more physical. And that's a nonsensical approach against this English team. So if we repeat that mistake for a 5th time in a row, I think there's legitimate pressure. What we need to do is just simply not repeat that tactical approach that has failed us 4 times in succession.
Well, is there a danger you can...
I think one of the things I wanted to clear up, and not clear up because, like I said, I'm responsible for the words I said. The situation I'm trying to lay out are the facts as I see it as an ex-England player for this current group of England players who have given us so much and who have been so good. But therefore, that benchmark is set so high. And when you fall... by the way, this is saying this is the pressure on it. If England win, we've then won 2 out of those 3 that we talked about, and actually 80% get them. It's those absolute fine margins at the highest end of sport. And like I say, 10, I work for Sky. 10 might be slightly strong in terms of 10 international careers, but do you know what I'm saying? You cannot expect to come 5th or 4th if things go in a Six Nations as an England team, and get a nice easy ride on a Lions tour and a ticket to get involved in the autumn internationals next year.
It was this very day 4 years ago, 2018, Paddy's Day, Ireland won the Grand Slam, and England finished 5th in that Six Nations. Just as you were talking there, that kind of landed with me. So what did 2018 do to Jones? Because obviously they rocked up to Dublin first day out in 2019 and changed everything and they slingshot it into the World Cup. So, it wasn't disastrous for Jones that year.
Yeah, that was good 2019. 2018, geez, you absolutely barreled. The thing about 2018, though, was they had so much credit in the bank. They'd gone 19 on the spin, 3-0 in Australia, beating everyone. So that was, you sort of felt that it was a slightly different occurrence. And there were young kids as well at that stage, and most of them would go on. I was chatting to someone today. The best thing, and again, you go. Sometimes you have to learn. History is the best teacher in a long way, some way. The best thing Woodward could have done January the 1st, 2004, was shaken the hands of 10 of us and said, "Thanks, lads. You've been amazing. Here's a bottle of Cristal, but you're not going, and you're not needed anymore." And that's the thing. That's the balance Eddie has to do between who of these players will get you to 2023, who will play in 2023, and who do you need to get playing sooner so they get to 2023 with 20 caps. And that process is expedited for him, by him, with a run of games with the wretched record.
Andy, to Ireland, we're grappling with some of those same problems, obviously, World Cup 2023 coming into view. So just looking over the course of this championship, the Irish tries, aside from the Italy game, we're talking the Henshaw moment where he sort of went off script in Cardiff. We're talking the French try, that was the Kelleher lucky bounce. That wasn't really a creative try at all. And then Scotland, Henshaw pounced on that ball from the kick, and we had Tyke Byrne with the pick and goes inside the 22. No starting winger has scored for Ireland thus far in the championship. Keith Earl scored late on against Italy. But, you know, in this championship where Rhys Sammet and Watson and Pennow and, you know, I'm sure Johnny Mayle come good and Van der Merwe has scored, it's kind of jumps out that for a start we're not getting the ball wide to our wingers or giving them many opportunities to score. What are you seeing from the Irish attack? Because I know it's been the bugbear of yours for about the last 1,000 years.
Unfortunately, not a whole lot different.
Okay.
I mean, the crossfield kick was from Johnny Sexton was smart and resourceful. It was using space that was available, and we got a bit lucky in terms of the bounce. But you can't base your attack at international level on an occasional crossfield kick. The biggest issue that has come out, Will probably wouldn't be aware of this, but one of the most startling stats in the Irish rugby attack is we're dead last by a distance in terms of offloads per possession. We have one in, I think it was 45 possessions, we've one offload, where the French are down at like one in every 9 or 10. And
you can't win. You can't win with games. You can't win with numbers like that. The game requires ball movement, shifting point of attack, lifting it into space, anticipating that ball being lifted. You become that horrible word in sport. You become predictable.
Yeah, and the problem is, Will, we've been like that, and it was hugely successful in the last couple of years of Joe Schmidt's regime. We were able to execute so well. In terms of technical detail, that we got away with being predictable, but we kept that style we persisted with it again and again and again, and teams very, very quickly found us out, but we haven't changed quickly. So it is disappointing coming towards the tail end of the Six Nations that we're not creating, we're not seeing wingers get their hands on the ball in space.
Yeah, but your wingers is slightly different, right? So Lowe's probably getting crucified at the moment for that tackle, and who knows what's happening with selection on the weekend. But you asked me who I want to play with from the Irish team. I said, you got to give me James Lowe. Put me in a team with him. And you're like, he'll make things happen. He'll go hunting. He'll do little private calls with 1 or 2 players. He'll do something, and he'll be super dangerous. And Keith's played a lot of time in the centre. Is someone who often wants to come in field and play. He's not, you're talking football. He wants to step in off his wing, get inside and get in amongst it and get his foot on the ball and play and have a lot of contact. He's not necessarily what I would say is a sort of your Johnny May, your Louis Rhys Sammet, outside bus. You don't have those. So other guys are scoring the tries. Now you might say that they're not. My point is, I wouldn't overly worry if all those 2 Irish wingers that you're picking aren't scoring tries. It's if you're not creating chances that the problem is.
I'm not sure we are. Yeah, I'm not sure we are.
And Keenan, you got to give time. I like Keenan. He runs the line. He reminds me a little bit of Bolshaw. Just sort of gangly, limmy, quick, very aware. Great under the high ball, by the way. And no, was he a Gaelic footballer? Just
I don't know. He looks like he was, but yeah, he's been a real
kid. He's only had a few. He's only had a few games. So give him time. I think Ireland are a much better team than, I'm not saying you're giving them credit for, than perhaps people are giving them credit for. And they were, Scotland are not Ireland were completely in control of that game until whatever happened. I don't know what Gary Ringrose is doing. He had a really poor day. I'm sorry that he's injured, because I'd have liked to have seen him back, because I think he's quality, but he had a bad day at the office. And you sort of invited Scotland back into the game. You stopped the clock at 55, 60 minutes, and you battered a half-decent Scotland team at Murrayfield. So I felt, although I took the handicap bet, I felt Wales would beat England, although I bottled it and went with +5 points rather than straight Wales. I felt England would always beat France, although that was a little bit tighter than I thought. And this one, I genuinely, I think it's too tight to call. You lose your man Ryan, who was sensational, but Mo Marney comes back in, so Byrne can go in the second row. He can start with Baird and start with O'Mahony. And for Paul O'Connor, there's just different chess pieces for his line-out wizardry. Yeah, look, I have to feel England have got their edge, and I'm not going to be predictable about it, but I think we'll turn you over. But it can easily play out. There's no way England can say they've been consistent enough to go to Dublin to have the absolute conviction of their own quality yet.
Will, would you consider Ireland predictable in attack then? No.
I quite like watching your guys play. Now, this is where it's great, because we're often toughest on our own kids. You know what I mean? Yeah. So Dunne's tough on the Irish lads, and he's going, but I'm seeing quality from England. And I think sometimes when the team you're asked to watch the most and look at, you can often, occasionally, just look at what we did wrong as opposed to celebrate what you did right. And that's why I sort of try and watch internationals 3 times. After the Wales game, I was on the Zoom call, we're having a beer with mates going, what's just happened there? I watched it back. We were pretty good against Wales. So for Ireland, I think Herring's come in and done a fantastic job. Your line-out is absolutely world-class. You got a couple of rocks at 1 and 3. Cian Healy looks fit again. Tag Furlong's charging back into form. Both you say Henderson's arguably the best second row of the championship. I mean, he's been unbelievable. Everything he touches, he's doing. He's like a Whitelock at the moment, error-free, all over everything, doing stuff. Ryan's been tidy without being off the charts. Will Connors always rearranging his scrum cap. What a chop tackler he is. Him v Curry. Ticket money alone. Standard does what he does, carries umpteen times, wins got the turnovers. Burns been knockout lines 15 material. I think you've struggled a little bit at 9. I think there's going to be a couple of. I think they're going to get after Gibson's Park and get on and charge him down. I think he's slightly slow at that, but he gets the tempo on his passing. I loved Henshaw this tournament. Sorry, I'm listing all your players that you know so much about. I loved Henshaw. I think he's been absolutely, maybe the last 2 games in particular. There was knockout at Murrayfield. I think you've got to give Lowe time, because Jeezy makes things happen, but I don't think he'll go that high on a tackle again. Earls is just Earls, isn't he? Sensational kicker, kick chaser, tackler, defender, quick, punchy, barrel-chested. And this fella, Keenan, will come, and Sexton hasn't missed a goal, did he, last week? So I come and excited, to go back to your initial question, I come excited about an amazing Saturday. But with a couple of teams, specifically in the Ireland-England game, where there's quite a lot on the line for everyone in that middle match.
Andy Dunne, why can't you be more like Will? You're always so negative on here talking about Ireland.
Very true. I'm really looking forward to Saturday all the time.
Andy, so in the attack then, what is jumping out to you? Because what are they trying to do? Because we've asked a few times, well, what's the pattern under Mike Catt and Andy Farrell? And various pundits have come on and said, I'm not too sure. So sure, you must be starting to see something now. We kicked a lot, obviously, against Scotland. Got a lot of joy from it. But so what's your main quibble at the moment? Like what's not happening that should be happening more?
I would always like to see, and I've said this probably, I am like a broken record, probably for 3 years in a row when I'm on the show, is the I think we're overusing the box kick as a means of starting attack or getting further up the field. I mean, it is ultimately giving away possession with a bid to retrieving it, to fully giving it away and surrendering it in the hope we get it back. It is a good tactic for putting pressure on, but I think it's just been overused, beaten to death. In fact, that much overused that I think I'd like to see more variation. And then the other side of our attack that I'm probably still just haven't seen enough of is the full width of the pitch being used, as in the space between the players being a wider space. So when we attack, we often attack in droves, in narrow channels, and we make sure we hold possession. So we retain possession and we get into the opposition 22. With multiple phases, we grind teams down, but in clutch moments when that hasn't worked, we haven't had an alternative. And so they're the things I haven't seen in our attack that in this Six Nations I still really haven't seen. I'd like to see that width. So the opposition either respond by going man for man, which means there's more space between those defenders, or if they defend narrow, we have the ability to at least go around them with a sharp passing game. So neither of those two things have happened. What we have seen when we've been good in attack is maintenance of possession, attacking narrow channels well, putting pressure on opposition defenders. They have to make those hits or we'll score if we maintain possession in the 22. And then we have used those occasional kick pass type options that Sexton used as well. We've used Henshaw hugely effectively. I'd agree with Will. I think he's been probably the outstanding performer for Ireland, certainly in the back line. And then we've seen the likes of Keenan coming through. I would hope to see if Lowe is selected again, I'd hope to see a significant improvement. He's tended to pull a rabbit out of a hat and create things really well for Leinster, Will, but he hasn't yet.
Yeah.
For Ireland, So
yeah, when I watched him for Leinster in the European Cup, I thought, when's he qualified for Ireland? He's going to South Africa on the Lions tour. He's then. Was it the French game? I actually didn't think one of those tries. I think he had to come and jump. I think inside let him down, but obviously the Hugh Jones try was just one of those. You could rewind the clock. Where he'll be lethal for you, and you against this mass. As you say, it's a big old English lumpy pack who look as though they got their edge back. And they want to press. They want to get you into the wide channels. They want to press. They want to shut you down before it makes third receiver. You got to punch. You got to have the confidence to punch close, and you got to use short sides. Yeah, where Gibson Park is strong, where he is sharp, is just scooting back up that short side. Where Lowe is outstanding, and where you have got some handlers who can play, is isolate an England short side, because sides who want to press still want to press on short side, but you can't press on a short side. You got to just actually occasionally give up 5 yards and use a touchline and be friendly and be less aggressive. I just don't know if this England team know how to be less aggressive, and therefore manipulate short sides as often as possible against a pressing defensive unit. That's your best chance of getting in behind. Then once you're in behind, then you can put width on it, because you know they won't be as aligned, they won't be as collective, they won't be as powerful, they won't be as suffocating from those wide rucks. But if you try and go wide off the wide rucks without denting them first, I think you almost end it. I know, unfortunately, Dunne, I think you've got to kick it at times like that. And you've got to use your aerial quality, which you undoubtedly have.
That fair, Andy? We've got to kick it as much as we're kicking it at times?
And then, by the way, I said that if you're on a wide channel and you go wide from a wide ruck against this England team, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
they'll come hunting, they'll sniff you down. But if you punch and create a short side and jag back, then do it. The Kiwis are great at it. The Crusaders are great at it under Scott Robertson. So they manipulate the ability to play wide by doing a little zigzag. Bang, 15-metre channel, bang, back to the 5-metre channel, now disorganised, now width, now play.
Yeah, I think that's a very shrewd observation, but we're not doing that. So that's an issue. If we were to be manipulative with defences, hit it up in midfield, the opposition hard pressed. That defence is not set when you split them down the middle. And like Will said, they've got to use, if they're on a short side, they've got to use the touch line as a friend. And England are not inclined to do that, which would make them more prone to some dog legs in the defence. Someone's going to shoot out of the line and there will be little holes. And I think that's something we haven't looked to exploit against England at all in the last 4 games. So, I mean, I think Will has given very shrewd insight as to how to beat a defence like that. We have yet to see that from the Irish squad. So perhaps on Saturday, if they're listening, they might take some of the advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see. I mean,
send Caddy a text.
He doesn't respond to mine anymore. I don't know why.
We've had so many screen grabs over the last couple of weeks of the Irish team with overlaps or with men over and just taking it into contact instead or kicking it instead, and that's kind of maybe the reason, Will, for our slight pessimism, unfortunately.
Yeah, I get that. But I tell you, I mean, I know it's that strange thing. So what I always try and be, and hopefully it's come across today, and the sort of we got to be tough on the issue and soft on the person. I hope everything we've said has not necessarily been isolated at an individual, because I know it's a horrible place to be, and I was one of those players in 2004 that had a terrible post-World Cup Six Nations, probably believing my own hype, open top bus tours, and it's difficult, and you end up then doing everything you know you shouldn't be doing. You're watching videos going, what am I doing? And it just takes something to spark it. And I hope, whilst obviously not being neutral, I hope both sides bring the sort of intensity that I know they can do, because I think it'd be an absolute belter, because there will be, if they can see space combined with the desperation that they'll both have, because they both understand the damaging impact of losing 3 games in one Six Nations.
Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, sponsors the Irish team of us, everyone in. One other point to mention, Andy, CJ Stander's announcement, interesting time. You kind of suspect this is going to be a bit of emotional energy for the team. That's the way they're talking about it already.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Even hearing some of the quotes from Sexton as captain, O'Mahony as captain in Munster, he seems not only a trusted lieutenant for those, he's just a valued friend, and he's kind of woven himself into the fabric of the Irish team's personality and the Munster team's personality. And I think that emotional lift is really going to help both Stander and that Irish team on Saturday, because, you know,
you'll need it, fellas, because our boys are coming for you. You'll need it. I tell you what, Gibson Park, don't take Tom Long over that box kick. Big bad Mara's going to get you. And don't go into that midfield, because Billy and Mara are waiting for you. Come on, fellas.
Before you go, Will, what about Wales then? So I think Alan Wynne-Jones alone has gone for his 4th Grand Slam, which is just nuts. Paris seems like a big old task, though. What do you think?
No chance. No, I've loved Wales. I think they've been fabulous. Look, they've had an opportunity, haven't they? They played against 14 men twice. Scotland were all over them like a cheap suit and had the game, and then didn't quite believe in themselves, perhaps, to put themselves on the brink of a triple crown. I look at them and I see a very powerful team. You got North, Adams, Williams. They moved Jonathan Davies to 12, big old lump. They've got a point of difference on bringing Sheedy off the bench. I think their back row is off the charts. I think the balance their back row has with Navidi, Tipperick and Faletau. And they are, you know, for all England's excuses, or excuses is the wrong word, for all England's complaints about Gozer, when it got to 24-all, Wales deserved to win that game because they kept playing. And the people who kept playing and kept tipping and kept stepping and kept moving the ball and shifting the contact were Navidi, Tipperick and Faletau. I know Navidi went off after 70, but in that 60 to 70-minute period when they bang, 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 penalty, because they put England under so much pressure. Beard has been a great counter forward to Alan Wynne-Jones. He's been as good as him, and Coryell comes off and scores. Wynne-Jones has been the best loose head in the tournament. The Sheriff can score and is a big game player. Their quality, I think Paris and this French team, and they've been nibbled at. They were away for 4 weeks. They had that COVID break. Meant they lost a little bit of their collective calmness minutes 50 to 70. I think I would, if Wales beat this French team in Paris, I think it could be Alan Wynn's best slam of the lot.
Yeah, it'd be an amazing way to do it. Fellas, we're pretty much out of time. So Andy Will said he reckons England will do it on Saturday in a word or two. Doesn't sound like you're back in Ireland the way you're talking about how we're doing things either.
No, I think England will just prove a little too strong overall, unfortunately. Particularly after Will's comment that Marrow's coming after us. You know, every single fibre of my being wants to squint and knock lumps out of them. But I don't...
The reality is, right, you invite me onto an Irish rugby show, right, and I've got to say England are going to win. So I'm going to get a load of grief. So what I might as well do is just come out punching. Because I'm going to get it anyway. The second I say I think England will win, I'll be go, oh, look at him. So I might as well say, we'll stuff you. Because it doesn't change your view of me as an English individual.
Sorry, we all think England will win. So there you go.
Yeah.
Andy, as ever, thanks so much. Will Greenwood, thank you for making time. Much appreciated.
Cheers, boys.
Get ready for the CheltenhamFestival with the Boyle